Chapter 1584. Yan Lin and Yang Tao, on the other hand, were shocked. Children, follow my mother's surname? Unheard of. Even if the husband and wife divorced, there was no reason for the child to follow the mother's surname. Could it be that Yang Xi's wife and daughter were fabricated? Yang Tao was a little confused. He secretly asked his lost friend with his eyes, how should he continue this topic? After a while, Yang Xi said, "Many years ago, my lord agreed to the decision of the soldiers in the female battalion to have an independent household. Although it's not perfect, it's possible for one household to have two households. My wife's background is special, so it's unlikely that she will be registered under my household register. It's fine if the child takes her surname." Hearing this, Yang Tao and Yan Lin became curious about Yang Xi's wife, who had never been heard of before. According to Yang Xi's analysis, Yang Xi's wife was most likely a member of the women's camp. Based on Yan Lin's understanding of Yang Xi, this man looked casual, but he was actually very demanding. His wife couldn't be an ordinary soldier either. She might be someone with a military rank or a real power. In this chaotic world, it was not easy for men or women to reach this stage. This was because the ways of the world were harsher and stricter to women. If a woman wanted to reach the same height, she had to put in more effort and toil than a man. From this, it could be seen how outstanding that woman was. She was good in every aspect, but unfortunately, she was blind. Why was it snatched away by Yang Xi? Yan Lin was hesitant, but Yang Tao was much more casual. He asked directly, "If that's the case, I'm curious. What is your wife's name?" Yang Xi hesitated for a moment. After all, his relationship with Colonel Jiang was tacitly acknowledged by everyone, but it had not been made public yet. "My wife's surname is Jiang." Martial artists did not have so many elaborate formalities, but Yang Xi was a scholar. It was impossible for him to casually tell his wife's maiden name to a man outside. Yan Lin and Yang Tao thought of a girl at the same time. Yang Tao was shocked. Could it be Jiang Nongqin, Field Officer Jiang? Yang Xi said, "It's my wife." The number of warriors under Jiang Pengji's command wasn't small, but it wasn't large either. Apart from a few who had the ability to command troops independently, most of them came from the wilderness. Their shortcomings were very obvious. They could fight battles, but they couldn't lead troops. As the only female general who held military power, Jiang Nongqin was naturally the center of attention. According to the information obtained by the spies, this female general had always been unmarried. When did she have a husband and a daughter? Yang Tao looked at Yang Xi with some eagerness in his eyes. If the child betrothal before was a joke, then this time, it was a little serious. Anyway, Yang Xi had agreed just now. Yang Tao only needed to go with the flow. Yang Xi was miserable. He tried to refuse, but Yan Lin interrupted him. Yang Xi was not in the mood to think about the wet nurse. Why was he thinking about this wet nurse? Of course, it was not because Yang Xi had taken a fancy to her, but because of something else. To be precise, Yang Xi had encountered a total of 2 mountain ghosts. Although these mountain ghosts didn't have any ill intentions, there was a saying that went, "Those who are not of our race are bound to have different intentions." Yang Xi couldn't guarantee that these mountain ghosts wouldn't cause trouble at the critical moment. He carefully recalled the details of his brief interaction with Mountain Ghost, trying to find a common characteristic between the two. Because of his strong memory, recalling the details was like dragging the mouse to watch a video frame by frame, not missing a single detail. He didn't make any progress until he saw the wet nurse today. His heart was filled with good fortune and a flash of inspiration appeared in his mind. He found a clue. Do they have anything in common? Yes. Whether it was the first mountain ghost of the fisherwoman or the second mountain ghost of the physician, Yang Xi had close contact with them. The first mountain ghost, a fisherwoman, sat on the deck and taught Qi shipbuilding. From his perspective, Yang Si could see her neck. It was faintly green, but he didn't take it seriously at the time. That was also the first time. How could Yang Si know that mountain ghosts would appear so frequently? The discovery of the second mountain ghost of the physician was purely an accident. Yang Si found that the other party's behavior was unusual. She wasn't from the women's camp, but she had more advanced and skilled trauma suturing skills than the women's camp medics. The soldiers sent out to investigate also got some clues from the fishermen. They all agreed that this doctor's medical skills were ordinary and there had never been a precedent of suturing. Thinking of the mountain ghost, Yang Si lied to the other party. As expected, the person gave himself away. Yang Si was very close at that time. With his height advantage, he did see some green lines on the back of the other party's neck. After a few hours, the mountain ghost left and the doctor returned to normal. From this, it could be seen that the mountain ghost stayed for a limited time, which confirmed the first mountain ghost story. When it was the turn of the third mountain ghost, the other party kept her head down the entire time. Her collar was relatively short, revealing a section of green lines. When Yang Si saw this, he suddenly thought of the two mountain ghosts from before. If this was the mark of the mountain ghost's possession, didn't it mean that there was something wrong with the wet nurse? Thinking of this, Yang Si secretly tested Yang Tao. From Yang Tao, he learned that Yan Shuxian, who was in charge of the inner residence, valued the child's new wet nurse very much. She didn't hire anyone with a bad smell, an ugly appearance, a lazy personality, a loose mouth, or a damaged skin. Among them, tattoos belonged to the category of damaged skin. In other words, this tattoo should have been obtained after the successful application. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for her to be hired. Although Yang Si didn't learn from the rangers to get tattoos to show off, he also knew that after the tattoo was done, the skin would feel uncomfortable for a while and it would take time to recuperate. This wet nurse had only been in office for a day or two. There was no time for the tattoo to return to normal. All kinds of inferences suggested that the wet nurse was most likely a mountain ghost. Only a wild spirit would have the ability to do something that didn't make sense to this extent. After coming to this conclusion, Yang Si wanted to meet the mountain ghost of the wet nurse. Not knowing that he was being watched by Yang Si, Lucky Emperor shuddered secretly. When Yan Shuxian met Lucky Emperor, she saw that he was a little shy but very dutiful. Her son also liked to drink his milk, so she allowed him to stay. Although Lucky Emperor didn't know how to chat, he could copy the flirtatious words from the Empress's forum. This amused Yan Shuxian, who had been depressed recently. The 5 million salted fishes were secretly jealous. They thought that Lucky Emperor would have a good show to watch when he was breastfeeding. They didn't expect him to turn around and flirt with a girl. Not only was he flirting with a girl, but the girl was actually Yang Tao's wife, Yan Lin's biological sister. This made the fans of both families grit their teeth in jealousy. Soon, Lucky Emperor was out of luck. Why? Because Yang Si found an excuse to see him. The salted fishes were stunned when they heard this. Could it be that the theme of today's live broadcast wasn't sexy Lucky Emperor breastfeeding, but scumbag Yang Si cheating on a woman online? A grown man suddenly wanted to see a married woman who was crouching in the inner courtyard breastfeeding. Put together, it made people's imagination run wild. Lucky Emperor didn't think it was messy enough. He asked anxiously, "If Master Yang wants to sleep with me, do you think I should comply or not?" The salted fishes were speechless. Chapter 1585. Although the European emperor was flirtatious, when he met Yang Si, he couldn't say anything. "Nice to meet you, messenger." The European emperor bowed to Yang Si as soon as he came up. He was trembling with fear and looked pitiful, which made Yang Si think that he was scary. "Do you know why I called you here?" Yang Xi's eyes were as cold as water. He didn't deliberately use his aura to suppress the European emperor, but the European emperor felt terrified. It was like playing with a mobile phone by the window in high school. The teacher was standing outside the window and looking at the back of the European emperor's head with a cold face. Unspoken rules? The European emperor was also scared and very nervous. When he realized what he had said, he quickly changed his words. I didn't mean that. I mean, I don't know why you called me here. Yang Xi listened to the European emperor's lame speech with a cold face. He seamlessly switched between servant, I, and servant. The European emperor was too nervous. As an otaku who had just graduated from high school and entered college for less than 2 months, he blushed when talking to a girl. He dared to say all kinds of flirtatious words through the internet, but when it came to face, he couldn't even say a word. He was timid, weak, and pitiful. Yang Xi also noticed this. He simply got up and walked to the European emperor. The European emperor was afraid to look at Yang Xi. He lowered his head slightly and stared at Yang Xi's socks. He thought to himself, there's no foot odor. Yang Xi didn't know the European emperor's flirtatious words. In front of the 5 million people, he touched the European emperor's neck with his 2 fingertips. He curled his fingers slightly, and there was indeed a green line on the back of the European emperor's neck. Before he could react, the European emperor jumped up like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. The bullet screen in the streaming room was in an uproar. Jiang Pengji, who was far away in Zhangjiang Pass, also stared at Yang Xi. What are you doing? The European emperor grabbed his clothes with one hand and covered the back of his neck with the other. His cheeks were flushed, and his eyes were slightly red. He was obviously dressed like a married woman, but he revealed the shyness of a virgin girl. He cried out involuntarily, "How dare you sleep with me?" Yang Xi looked at his fingers and was stunned for a moment. Then, he immediately burst out laughing. I don't even know if you're a man or a woman. Did I sleep with you? Yang Xi was not a fool. From the tone and context in which the European emperor mentioned the unspoken rules twice, he roughly guessed what the unspoken rules meant. Humph, it was most likely something between a man and a woman. Even though he had settled down now, Yang Xi was still a veteran when he was young. What kind of beauty had he not seen before? No matter how bad his taste was, he wouldn't fall for a married woman, right? Tell me honestly, why did you sneak into Yang Tao's residence? The more a person liked to laugh and act coquettishly, the more pressure they would give others when they were serious. Looking at Yang Xi, Europe King was so scared that he almost cried, especially when Yang Xi's dagger was still on his neck. What are you doing? I didn't provoke you. Yang Xi sneered and spat out 2 words, which made the European emperor's body stiffen. Mountain ghost. Lucky Emperor was lying on the ground, and Yang Xi's dagger was placed across his neck. The back of his neck was facing Yang Xi, and the green tattoo was particularly eye-catching. This should be the sign of a mountain ghost possessing a mortal's body, right? Yang Xi's fingers brushed past the skin, and there was no protrusion. It was as if it was not stabbed by an external force, but more like it was coming out from the inside. I don't care how you mountain ghosts run around. I owe a debt of gratitude to your kind. I won't do anything to you because of this debt of gratitude. However, you have to tell me your purpose in coming to Yang Tao's residence. Don't you know that Yang Tao wants to surrender to my master? If something happens now, how many twists and turns will there be? Both the European emperor and the salted fish in the live broadcast room were shocked by this turn of events. Sure enough, transmigration was not an easy job. These ancient people were more cunning than the other. Compared to them, Yang Xi was more like a mountain spirit. Driven by a strong desire to live, the European emperor stammered, I really don't have any bad intentions. I'm still confused. I'm a man, and I haven't even found a girlfriend yet, but I'm being used as a milk bottle by a child. I'm really at a disadvantage. I'm not a nanny. If he had known this earlier, he would have sat in front of the computer and continued to play games. It was better to nurse his teammates than to be breastfed by a little kid. Yang Si was speechless. Letting go of the dagger, the European emperor looked like a good woman who had been forced. Yang Si felt a headache coming on. I've met a total of 3 mountain ghosts. The first one knows shipbuilding skills, and the second one is excellent at suturing wounds. What do you know? In the face of such a blatant question, the European emperor's fragile heart shattered. He knelt down with a thud, looking as if he had suffered a great blow. I admit that they're all big shots, but I'm just a rookie. However, I'm good at nursing people, and I'm proficient at it. If you were my teammate, I could help you ascend to the 12th stage. Yang Si was speechless. The 12th stage? He tried his best to analyze the European emperor's words and frowned. I'm just an ordinary person. I can't cultivate and ascend. He could also hear that there were differences in the mountain ghosts. The first 2 were most likely accomplished in a certain aspect, but the one in front of him. Perhaps even Yang Tao's son could bully him. Thinking of this, Yang Si felt that it was boring and uninteresting. However, the mountain ghost in front of him was so innocent and harmless. Perhaps he could get some information out of him. Thinking of this, Yang Si's stomach began to rumble with black water. Didn't they say that mountain ghosts rarely appear in the world? Why are you guys possessing mortals one after another? The European emperor broke out in a cold sweat. He bit his lower lip and did not know how to answer. If he answered incorrectly, he might cause trouble to the people who came after him. Yang Si was too shrewd, and it was difficult for him to lie. One was deliberately trying to get information out of him, and the other was guilty and afraid. Yang Si trying to get information out of him was easier than eating and drinking. Not long after, Yang Si found out from the other party that the mountain ghosts did not appear in groups. They would appear once every 7 days and randomly possess a living creature. There are tens of millions of living people in the world, and there are countless other living creatures. Why did I encounter 3 mountain ghosts in a few months? The European emperor said with a bitter face, maybe it's because you're too lucky. The European emperor who encountered Yang Si was really unlucky, especially himself. He was simply unlucky. Yang Si asked, when did you possess this person? The European emperor looked at the time and said, 2 hours ago. He would possess a person for 7 days, and each possession would last for 12 hours. Yang Si silently noted down the time and pattern. It's not my place to interfere if you want to travel the world. However, I have a piece of advice that you should keep in mind. Yang Si's expression turned cold. What advice? Yang Si said, don't do anything that will hurt my master or hinder my master's hegemony. The European emperor was silent for a moment. He never expected that little Rongrong would have the attributes of a loyal dog. The anchor was really a woman that made people envious and jealous. Yang Si sneered and said, the tattoos on the back of your necks can't be concealed if you possess them, right? The European emperor looked confused and did not understand what Yang Si was talking about. Yang Si was speechless. Chapter 1586. Perhaps it was because the onlookers saw the game more clearly than the players. The salted fish would not be able to react to Yang Si's aura in person, but when they watched the live broadcast through the screen, their reaction speed was very fast. This was probably due to the bombardment of palace dramas. How scary the women in the palace dramas were. It was as if every word and every look carried a deep meaning. At this time, every salted fish was like a detective with an IQ of more than 200, using a magnifying glass to dig out every hidden meaning. Of course, the salted fish would not be as nervous as the lucky emperor, so their brains worked quickly and they quickly figured out what he meant. Yutiandu, well, did I hear it wrong? Is Boss Yang Si threatening us? Tudu Faccio, no, you didn't hear it wrong. He is threatening us, and it's a ridiculous threat. We are all the streamers' sweet little cotton-padded jackets. How could we do anything to hinder the streamers' hegemony? Xiao Cici's worried look is so cute. Guangchang Wuwang, that's not the point. The point is that the streamer saw Yang Si secretly expressing his loyalty. This boss will have a rich future in the future. The most important thing is that he has taken a big step toward marrying Jiang Xiaowei. If Jiang Xiaowei knew about this, her favorability would be off the charts. As salted fish who liked any popular couple, they once supported Jiangpeng and GX Jiang Nongqin's Frost Jiang. However, the streamer still chose Wei Ci, who was more popular. This made many lesbian fans of the cute couple wring their hands. Even though Jiang Nongqin and Yang Si had become a couple in the past 2 years, and they even got pregnant and gave birth to a daughter, the group of lesbian fans did not climb over the wall. Instead, they imagined a sadomasochistic love story. At the same time, they were even more happy to see Yang Si's recent situation of being a father and still being single. To return a beauty, one had to first increase the favorability of the Lord, rival in love. It was a sour feeling. Looking at the salted fish's bullet screen, the originally nervous and afraid Oh Huang could not hold it in anymore. He burst out laughing. Yang Si's eyes narrowed and he asked, "What are you laughing at?" "Oh no." The lucky emperor's cheeks, which had been flushed with great difficulty, turned pale again. He said, "I just think you are thinking too much. I have no ill intentions." Whether the lucky emperor was swearing or something else, Yang Si would not easily believe him. He remained vigilant. Those who are not of the same race will surely have different intentions. Mountain Ghost was not a human, so how could he believe everything? After asking what he needed to ask, Yang Si let the European emperor leave. He didn't expect the European emperor to hesitate. He wanted to say something, but he didn't. Yang Si asked, "Is there anything else?" If there was nothing else, he would leave quickly. He still had to think of an excuse and write a letter to inform his lord of what had happened today. The European emperor blushed and said shyly, "Can you give me an autograph?" Yang Si laughed involuntarily. "You mountain ghosts like to collect signatures from mortals so much?" It seemed like the first fisherwoman mountain ghost he met also asked Yang Si and the others for an autograph before she left, saying that she would take it back as a souvenir. "I think you have a bright future ahead of you. Maybe you'll be a famous person in the history books. Your handwriting is worth collecting." Even though there was a lucky star born every 7 days, there were only a few people who had the chance to get close to Jiang Pengji and the others. Their autographs and personal accessories were all sold at high prices. The European emperor was not greedy. If he asked Yang Si for an expensive item, it was unlikely that Yang Si would agree. It was the same as a stranger asking for a mobile phone. However, if it was just an autograph, the European emperor felt that there was still hope. The lousy RPG game that he was obsessed with was too reliant on configuration. Unfortunately, he was poor and had no money to replace the expensive game notebook for that lousy game. If he had Yang Si's autograph and auctioned it online, he would have the money for the game notebook. He would have a lot of fun playing games in the future. In order to achieve his goal, the European emperor even said good things against his will and flattered Yang Si. As a person with backbone, if it wasn't for the small amount of money to buy the game notebook, he wouldn't have given in to Yang Si. Yang Si said with a smile, "That sounds nice. Since it sounds nice, sign a few more autographs for me." He took advantage of the situation and said, "Getting rich depends on you, big boobs." Yang Si was speechless. He suddenly felt that his previous conspiracy theories and worries were all for nothing. Why was he worried that the mountain ghosts might hinder his lord's hegemony and threaten his lord's safety? If the mountain ghosts were so naive and easy to fool, Yang Si would be worried about this race. Would they really die because of their naivety? Seeing this, the European emperor said, "Why do I feel that your expression and eyes seem to be despising me?" Yang Si denied it 3 times. "No, I didn't. Don't talk nonsense." The European emperor happily took Yang Si's autograph and his well wishes and left, leaving Yang Si alone in a dilemma. He drew the tattoo on Empress O's neck with a good stroke and frowned slightly. Even though he was experienced and knowledgeable, he couldn't figure out the origin or meaning of the lines. Forget it. Since one appears every 7 days, I'll just be careful in the future. If the mountain ghosts could hide the tattoo on the back of their neck, they wouldn't have exposed themselves in 3 consecutive times. If the mountain ghosts were really a threat, Yang Si could also use the pattern of their appearance and the symbol on the back of their neck to guard against them. The appearance of the European emperor was just an interlude. Yang Tao's surrender was the big deal. Using the European emperor's perspective, Jiang Pengji roughly pieced together what happened over there. The Nia family isn't a threat for the time being. Let them fight amongst themselves. But Shui's side is too restless and needs to be taught a lesson. Jiang Pengji said to Wei Ci, "Yang Tao's surrender has to be done by me personally. It's inconvenient for Jing Rong and the rest, and many things aren't easy to settle." Even though Yang Tao had surrendered, he was once a feudal lord and he had taken the initiative to surrender. It was different from being defeated and captured. It wasn't appropriate for Yang Si and the rest to show up, so they could only settle him down and wait for Jiang Pengji to come over and deal with it. A portion of the troops were left at Zhanjiang Pass to prevent the Nia family from making any changes. The rest could be pulled to Zhangzhou and try to take down Nansheng before the Nia family recovered. Once Nansheng was taken down, Zhongzhou would no longer be a concern. To prevent any accidents, Jiang Pengji specially asked Qiguan Rang, Sun Wan, and the rest to stay. If the opportunity to attack Zhongzhou was ripe, they didn't need Jiang Pengji's consent. This was considered a complete delegation of power. Qiguan Rang said, "The situation in Nansheng is unclear. Why don't you bring more people over, my lord? We can be at ease." Jiang Pengji asked, "Wenjing, do you have any suggestions?" Qiguan Rang glanced in Wei Ci's direction and said, "Zixiao is cautious and thoughtful. He has also gone deep into Nansheng and has a good understanding of the situation there. My lord, you can bring him over. In addition, General Bai Ning is from Nansheng. Maybe he can be of use." Bai Ning was just an extra. Qiguan Rang's goal was still Wei Ci. His lord was too self-disciplined. As a subject, he was also worried. He could only find an opportunity to get the two of them together. Maybe one day, the goddess of children would appear and send the young lord over? Why would Wei Ci stay at Zhanjiang Pass? It wasn't that he had to be there, but the young lord really had to be there. Jiang Pengji silently glanced at Qiguan Rang. Qiguan Rang silently looked back at her without a hint of fear. Feeling helpless, she said in private, "We're still at war. Be serious." Chapter 1587. I've lived for more than 70 years, but this is the first time I've been hastened. I feel like I have an additional mother-in-law. She needed time to prepare for the journey to Zhangzhou. As the lord, Jiang Pengji did not need to be busy. Naturally, someone would arrange everything for her. She had nothing to do and told Wei Ci about Qiguan Rang hastening his pregnancy. The latter's expression was like an overturned pallet. Jiang Pengji thought he was puzzled about the 70-plus years. She smiled faintly and explained, "The world I lived in my previous life is very different from this place. Ordinary people can easily live to 150 or 200 years old. Those who are strong and talented can even break through the limit and live to 300 or 400 years. As for me, although I have this potential, I'll most likely die in the line of duty because of my job. Don't think that I'm very old at 40 years old in my previous life. According to the average lifespan of this world, I'm considered to have just reached adulthood. I'm still young. Jiang Pengji emphasized the word young. She did not want others to say that she was an old cow that ate young grass. Moreover, Wei Xi's age in his previous life was not as young as Jiang Pengji's. Wei Xi laughed and said, "No, my lord, you've misunderstood. I'm just curious, where did the term mother-in-law come from?" If the lord compared Qiguan Rang to a mother-in-law, wouldn't Wei Xi have an additional mother for no reason? Jiang Pengji said matter-of-factly, "Have you ever seen a father-in-law urge his son-in-law to have an heir as soon as possible? Usually, it was the mother-in-law or mother-in-law who hastened the pregnancy." Wei Xi held his forehead speechlessly. Was that the main point? Wasn't the main point why Wenzheng was a mother-in-law and not a mother-in-law? Wei Xi felt relieved after thinking about it. His lord could not be the one who married, and he did not want to have a mother-in-law like Qiguan Rang. No matter which one it was, it sounded like a nightmare. Wenzheng is also confused because of his concern. Wei Xi looked like he understood. As someone who had been through it, he had been anxious about the young lord's affairs in his previous life. He never expected the emperor to take a fancy to him. He inexplicably felt like he had shot himself in the foot. Wei Xi's mind was wandering. Jiang Pengji's words pulled him back to the human world. Jiang Pengji smiled and said, "A few days ago, he sent people into the mountains to look for wild animals that nourish yin and strengthen yang. Do you feel that your diet has changed?" Upon hearing this, Wei Xi's face immediately turned a little livid. Seeing his cute reaction, Jiang Pengji couldn't help but laugh out loud. "Wenzheng, you're really... It's fine if you don't help Ci, but why are you mocking me?" Wei Xi held back for a long time but could not find the right words. Jiang Pengji, on the other hand, smiled happily and leaned half of her body toward him. To prevent Jiang Pengji from falling to the ground, Wei Xi stretched out his hands to support her. From an outsider's point of view, the two of them were in an intimate position. A third person could not intervene. How is this a mockery? Jiang Pengji cupped his cheeks with both hands and took a deep breath. Wei Xi turned his head with difficulty to avoid her and said with difficulty, "One must not have sex in broad daylight." Even though the two of them had a relationship that was not supposed to have, Wei Xi was still conservative in his bones. He was very conflicted about his lord's frequent intimacy. She was clearly very happy in her heart, but when she sobered up, she felt ashamed. From time to time, this would happen. Wei Xi even suspected that he was the femme fatale, in the eyes of others, seducing the originally wise and mighty monarch into indulging in his beauty. Even the Empress in her previous life was not so passionate and open. She was especially reserved in her feelings and was even as indifferent as water. Jiang Pengji glanced at the clothes of the two of them. They had not taken off a single piece. This can be considered as sex in broad daylight? She smiled and said, "Zixiao's standards for sex in broad daylight are really low." Wei Xi coughed lightly. Seeing that Jiang Pengji's eyes seemed to have a strange look, he understood and changed the topic with a strong desire to survive. "Speaking of Wenzheng's matter, I'm afraid it's not his idea alone." Jiang Pengji could not help but laugh, but she did not expose Wei Xi's lame actions. "Young lord, what will come will come. No matter what, we have to wait until Nansheng and Zhongzhou are conquered. Only when the world is stable can I have the energy to consider the matter of the heir." Due to the limitations of technology in this era, Jiang Pengji could not enjoy the benefits of waiting for a baby to be born after an operation. She had to give birth to the heir herself. Women used their bodies to give birth to life. There were many inconveniences in life. She had to make thorough preparations before considering this. Anyway, our bodies are not bad and we don't have bad habits. Maybe we can have a child in one go. Wei Xi agreed with this. In the previous life, Her Highness Jiang Yen was born not long after their first time. At that time, their physical conditions were not as good as in this life. From the time Her Majesty discovered that she was pregnant to the time she gave birth, everything went smoothly. Her Highness Jiang Yen was born in only 2 hours. However, there was an unforeseen event when she gave birth to Wei Kong. The delivery room was mixed with something evil. It was difficult to give birth to that unfilial son after a day and a night. When talking about children, Wei Xi was easily distracted. My lord is in good health. You can have the young lord at any time. On the other hand, Wenjing and the others have to wait. Jiang Pengji said, what is obtained too easily is often not cherished. Let them look forward to it so much that their necks grow, and they will know how to cherish it. Wei Xi thought of the previous life and could not help but laugh. My lord, aren't you afraid that the young lord will be spoiled? Do you think that's possible? They don't even spoil their own children. How can they spoil the young lord? Jiang Pengji had seen the children of the next generation. None of them were crooked, especially Fengzhen's family. If the upper beam is not straight, the lower beam will be straight. That's true. They are already deeply grateful to have a young lord. They look forward to becoming dragons and phoenixes. How would they dare to spoil others? In the previous life, Jiang Yen was also highly anticipated by everyone. Even though she was a girl, no one said anything about it. She was raised according to the standards of the crown prince in all aspects. Even when Her Majesty was pregnant with another child, apart from most of the disloyal fellows, Qiguan Rang and a few others were the few officials who did not propose to abolish the crown prince, Jiang Yen, and cultivate a male heir again. Their political stance was also biased towards Jiang Yen. Of course, this was also related to Crown Prince Zhang's premature death at birth. If Fushou had not faked his death and hidden, Her Majesty and Her Highness Jiang Yen would have been in danger. It would not have been easy for Jiang Yen to win against her brother. You're distracted again. This is the third time. Jiang Pengji gently pinched his cheeks. Recently, she had been feeding him delicious food. Why did his cheeks not grow fat? Wei Xi said, I can't help but think of Fushou. Jiang Pengji said, why do you think of him? She had seen 2 children in Wei Xi's spiritual world. The child named Wei Tsong was quite likable. He looked like Wei Xi. Wei Xi said, as a father, I didn't do my duty to teach him and caused him to go astray. I'm ashamed of Her Majesty's trust. Wei Zixiao, I've tolerated it for a long time. Jiang Pengji's face darkened when she heard that. She pinched his cheeks with both hands and pretended to be angry. Don't you think it's too much to mention another woman in front of me? Look at the color of my head. You can even breed horses on my head. Chapter 1588. Are you being jealous of yourself, my lord? Wei Xi asked with some uncertainty, but the corners of his lips could not help but curl up. He was already in his 70s in both his previous lives, but his mentality now was like that of a reckless boy who had just awakened to love. If his sweetheart was willing to pay more attention to him and look at him more, he could not help but be overjoyed. Jiang Pengji admitted it openly and said, so what if I am? Even if Her Majesty, in your previous life was me, I don't have that memory. To me, she is another person. You always feel sad when you mention her. Isn't it normal for me to be jealous? She was not like the man in front of her who said one thing but meant another. She had seen through Wei Xi's temperament. He said whatever he wanted to say. She did not expect his brain to guess the feelings she wanted to express. She admitted that she was jealous. So what? Wei Ci held back his laughter and said, "My lord and I are almost 150 years old. We are an old couple. Let's not talk about this." Jiang Pengji raised her eyebrows and pouted. "Tell me honestly, in your heart, who is more important, me or your majesty?" Wei Ci was speechless. His strong desire to live told him that this was a terrible question that would kill him. Even though Wei Ci was usually eloquent, he did not dare to answer rashly for fear of stepping on a landmine. In a dilemma, he could only seek help from the culprit, who looked at him with a faint smile. "How do you think I should answer, my lord?" Jiang Pengji said, "Lust." "What? Lust?" Jiang Pengji gestured a peace sign. "There are no lovers' conflicts that can't be settled with a kiss. If there are, then kiss both of us." Wei Ci was speechless. Even though Wei Ci had seen all kinds of storms, he still could not withstand his lord's flirtatious tricks from time to time. Sometimes he wondered if he was blind. Her Majesty and his lord were clearly the same person. The former was cold and reserved. She would occasionally laugh heartily and was rarely affectionate. The latter seemed to dig out all her feelings, making him unable to resist. Even so, he had to accept it even if he could not resist it. After all, she was the person he looked up to, chased after, and loved for 2 lifetimes. Their relationship grew steadily. Jiang Pengji was not a petty person. She often shared her feelings with others. For example, if Wei Ci sent her supper in the middle of the night, she would turn on a live broadcast to abuse the single men in the middle of the night. Why did he say that he was abusing the single dogs? Which couple with a nightlife would fight for a spot in the live broadcast room at this time? Only single dogs would starve to play games, play on their phones, and watch live streams. Adults who were no longer single were all enjoying life. Therefore, during this period of time, the streaming room was filled with the wails and cries of the salted fish. It was as lively as the new year. Only Jiang Pengji was happy. Her happiness was built on the pain of 5 million salted fish, so it was precious to savor it. Fortunately, these painful days did not last for too long. "Tudu Feiqiu, thank you, Boss Qiguan. I've finally completed the prerequisites for the expedition. Otherwise, the host would have gone crazy. Little luck, thank you too. The host seems to have taken the wrong medicine these days. She's been showing off her love life. The whole world knows that she's no longer single. Have a dream is great, wrong. It's not the whole world. It's 2 dimensions. 12 billion people know that she's no longer single." Jiang Pengji changed into her military uniform again and leaped onto the horse's back. "Let's go." The towering mountains near Zhanjiang Pass slowly descended into the horizon behind her. Qiguan Rang and the others stood on the city wall and watched the army leave. They were bathed in the afterglow of the setting sun. Their bodies seemed to be surrounded by a golden glow. "If we can take down Nanxing this time, the world will be within reach." Qiguan Rang's voice was not loud, but it had a certain power, as if he was talking about the future. Sun Wen corrected him. "It's not, the world will be within reach. It's clearly, the golden age will be within reach." "Yes, the golden age will be within reach." Qiguan Rang revealed a rare smile. "We have to work hard too. We don't want to be a burden to our lord." Sun Wen raised his eyebrows. He did not think that Qiguan Rang's words were said casually. They were obviously filled with ambition. "What do you plan to do?" Qiguan Rang replied, "Of course, I want to make Zhongzhou even more chaotic. I want them to be tired of fighting amongst themselves. If possible, I can even coordinate with them from the inside." Speaking of sowing discord, Qiguan Rang was also an expert. He was no weaker than Sun Wen when he provoked the 3 tribes of the northern borderline. "From what you're saying, you plan to secretly support the forces in Zhongzhou?" The situation in Zhongzhou was already chaotic enough, but in the eyes of the two, it was still lacking. They still needed to fan the flames. If we personally send troops, it will easily backfire and cause the aristocratic families of Zhongzhou to unite against the external threat. Qiguan Rang understood this point very well. Once there was a common enemy and a greater hatred, former enemies could also temporarily become allies and unite against the external threat. This was not what Qiguan Rang wanted to see. It's better to secretly support one person and use the other party's hand to plant informants and instigate more intense internal strife. The fiercer the internal strife in Zhongzhou, the greater Qiguan Rang's profits would be. Qiguan Rang was not worried that no one would be willing to cooperate with him. Standing in front of sufficiently tempting benefits, not many people could resist, let alone those who only had ambition but no intelligence to match it. Qiguan Rang asked Sun Wen, "Zidao, what do you think?" Sun Wen smiled and said, "Very good." He had settled a portion of the enmity with the Nie family, but it was far from enough. To uproot the Nie family, as the Lord, Jiang Pengji still had to reach a higher position. If she could take Zhongzhou into her own hands, what would the Nie family amount to? Sun Wen naturally agreed with Qiguan Rang's suggestion. Putting aside their plans for the time being, Jiang Pengji began her boring march. Zhanjiang Pass was not very far from Zhangzhou. Riding horses at full speed, coupled with the waterway, one could usually reach it in half a month or 20 days. However, Jiang Pengji brought along 50,000 troops and horses. Naturally, the speed of the army could not be compared to the speed of the messenger. Overall, it was much slower. On the 10th day of the march, the scouts of the army stopped a messenger. After interrogating him, they found out that the messenger was coming for Jiang Pengji. Jiang Pengji took off her thick military uniform and changed into a black robe with arrow sleeves. The hem of the robe was shortened by her. It barely reached her knees. Paired with long pants, it was more convenient to move around. The audience in the streaming room had taught her to make the robe. They had recommended it to her, saying that they wanted to see how she looked like in the robe. Jiang Pengji had people make the robe according to the words given by the audience. It was indeed very comfortable to wear and looked heroic and free. No one had seen this style of clothing before. It was a little foreign, but Jiang Pengji was the lord. Even if they had not seen it before, no one dared to say anything. She had ridden for the whole day. At that moment, she was sitting in the tent, washing her hands and preparing to eat. "Messenger?" Jiang Pengji said, "Let him in." "Is there any change at the front line in Zhangzhou?" Unbeknownst to them, Jiang Pengji had hit the nail on the head. The messenger entered the tent and half knelt to report. It was just a few words, but everyone in the tent was so shocked that they could not react. Wei Ci, who was helping Jiang Pengji set the bowls and chopsticks, trembled. A pair of chopsticks fell on the table with a clang. Chapter 1589. Yang Tao? Rebelling with his troops? Jiang Pengji was stunned for a moment. She calmly reached out to tidy up the ivory chopsticks on the table and took the rice bowl that Wei Ci had filled. Wei Ci came back to his senses and quietly stepped aside. Jiang Pengji asked the messenger, "What's going on? Tell me everything in detail." Was Yang Tao's brain filled with water or kicked by a donkey? Otherwise, why would he do such a stupid thing? He led his troops to surrender, and there were only slightly more than 20,000 remnant troops under his command. Nearly half of these remnant troops had been used by Yang Si to break them up and transfer them to other places with honorable reasons. In other words, Yang Tao only had about 10,000 troops at his disposal. What could he use to rebel? When Jiang Pengji heard the absurd news, she was not shocked or angry. Instead, she was confused. Even with her brain, she couldn't figure out how Yang Tao would betray her after pledging allegiance. Was he going to openly send his head to her? Jiang Pengji was not the only one who thought so. Many people who were watching the live stream were also shocked by Yang Tao's actions. Don't be unsatisfied. Although it's normal to fake surrender when two armies fight, it's not a jack of all trades. It can't be used at all times. It depends on the situation. Yang Tao's actions were like throwing an egg against a stone. It was no different from seeking death. Love 36 stratagems. Yang Tao faked his surrender and rebelled. He almost handed the streamer a knife that could stab him to death without tarnishing his reputation. Even if he's stupid, the people around him shouldn't be brainless, right? Streamer, I think there's something fishy about this. Liang Tian Shuizi too, I think there's something fishy, too. Maybe there's an inside story? Luo peanut candy, Yang Tao is stupid, but Yan Lin definitely has a brain. He wouldn't let Yang Tao do this, would he? Historical experience tells us that the officials who surrender can still live. At most, they will change to a different monarch. But the enemy leader who surrenders will not have it so easy. Yang Tao didn't tuck his tail between his legs and reduce his presence to avoid becoming a thorn in the streamer's side. How dare he jump out and court death? Jiang Pengji's career fans analyzed the situation seriously, while the gossip fans were focused on talking nonsense and watching the show. For them, they didn't care who was killed by the streamer, as long as they enjoyed watching. Amidst everyone's anticipation, the messenger told the truth one by one. Jiang Pengji frowned slightly after hearing that, but Wei Ci, who was beside her, relaxed his expression. Instead, he revealed an expression that said, as expected. Without waiting for Wei Ci to speak, Jiang Pengji said to the messenger, I already know about this. Go back and tell military advisor Yang to pay attention to Nancheng's army. Don't let them take advantage of the situation. Let's not deal with Yang Tao's matter for the time being. We'll make a decision after I arrive with the army. Hearing that Jiang Pengji didn't plan to deal with Yang Tao, the salted fish couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. If Yang Tao was hacked to death by the host, wouldn't there be one less male god in this world that they could lick up to? After Jiang Pengji finished speaking, the messenger accepted the order and retreated. The others in the tent also retreated tactfully. Zixiao, do you have anything to say? Jiang Pengji raised her hand and picked up the ivory chopsticks that were placed neatly on the table. Her left hand held a black lacquered wooden bowl that was twice the size of her palm. Wei Ci stood up and served the meat dishes and soup that were not served to the table. He looked like a virtuous husband and father. Wei Ci smiled and said, seeing your expression, I know that you have already made up your mind. I'm afraid that there is more to Yang Tao's betrayal than meets the eye. It was not that they believed in Yang Tao's character and thought that he would never betray them once he surrendered. It was simply that betrayal would not benefit Yang Tao at all. Instead, it would bring about the destruction of his entire clan. After questioning the messenger in detail just now, Jiang Pengji had other conjectures. Jiang Pengji said, if this matter is not handled properly, Yang Tao will be accused of leading the troops to rebel without any explanation. That will be terrible. Moreover, Yang Tao did not rebel at all. Jiang Pengji had a simple lunch. The army continued their journey, but her brows were still tightly knitted. Because the weather had turned cold and the nights were longer than the days, the sky quickly darkened. If she had not received the battle report that day, she would have stopped to rest and reorganize. Now, she had to seize the time to advance. She asked her men to walk in the dark for more than 4 hours. Only when everyone was tired did she give the order to stop. Jiang Pengji stayed in the simple tent and thought about the day's matters. Wei Ci brought someone to bring her a small bucket of hot water and a large portion of supper. She sniffed and smiled. As expected, Zixiao understands me better. My lord, go wash your hands and face first. You can eat after soaking your feet, Wei Ci said. You've been on the road for the whole day. You should relieve your fatigue. This was just a small matter. Of course, Jiang Pengji would not reject his good intentions. She simply used the hot water to wipe her exposed skin. Her fatigue eased a lot. At this time, eating to her heart's content was better than being a deity. She ate until she was 80% full. She could not help but burp. Zixiao's culinary skills are really getting better and better. When we retire in the future, you can open a small restaurant. I'll be the shopkeeper and collect money for you. Wei Ci could not help but laugh. My lord, are you in a better mood now? Much better. Indeed, there is nothing that a good meal can't solve. If there is, then I'll have 2 meals. Jiang Pengji opened her mouth and made Wei Ci blush every time. The delicious food made by Zixiao's skillful hands is even more powerful. Wei Ci withdrew his hand. Don't think that he did not feel that she was taking advantage of the situation. Yang Tao's matter is inexplicably in line with the previous life. There's a 99% chance that it's not a rebellion. Jiang Pengji picked her teeth with a toothpick. She was not surprised by Wei Ci's words at all. She asked, did something similar happen in the previous life? Indeed, Wei Ci said leisurely. Her Majesty also took this opportunity to recruit Yang Tao as a general. According to normal procedures, Yang Tao would most likely be placed under house arrest and become a second Huang Song. Every day, when he opened his eyes, he only had to think about what to eat and what fun to play. However, in the previous life, Yang Tao became a commander who was second only to Fu Wang. Although Yang Tao was only ranked 5th on the martial list of the Jinling Pavilion, his status was higher than the 4th and 3rd. When the Jiang dynasty founded the country, Yang Tao was also the only person who was conferred a title of nobility of a higher rank. Although this title was not hereditary and had a lot of embellishment. Because Yang Tao was a vassal who surrendered, he needed to be conferred an additional title to appease the old officials of Yang Tao's lineage. But to be able to obtain this honor, his strength was undoubtedly very good at fighting. It could be said that apart from Her Majesty, Yang Tao was the biggest winner in life among the vassals in troubled times. The turning point of all this was after Yang Tao surrendered, the city that he temporarily lived in was ambushed by the enemy. There were not many guards there. Yang Tao's entire family was in the city. He took the risk of being suspected by Her Majesty and then punished and executed. He mobilized his old subordinates to resist the invading enemy and made a great contribution. Wei Ci carefully pondered the message sent by the messenger. Strangely, he realized that Yang Tao's experience in this life was different from his previous life, but he was just as lucky. Chapter 1590. Wei Ci said with a jealous and bitter expression, otherwise, why would they say that he is a capable person who entered the Golden Scale Pavilion? Jiang Pengji said, from what you said, it seems that Zixiao didn't go in. When Wei Ci laid his cards on the table with her, he told her many things about his past life, such as the civil and martial arts role of the Golden Scale Pavilion. The Golden Scale Pavilion in the previous life was not the same as the Golden Scale Pavilion in the present life. The Golden Scale Pavilion in the present life was a super large library that was open to the public for free. The Golden Scale Pavilion in the previous life was a glorious holy land that all the scholars and martial artists in the world yearned for. This place was also known as the Path to Heaven, implying that one could ascend to heaven with a single step. The royal family of the Jiang dynasty had set a strict rule that only the civil and military officials who had made great contributions to the people, the country, the imperial court, and the emperor were qualified to have their portraits in the Golden Scale Pavilion and enjoy the worship of the people just like the royal family. In front of the Golden Scale Pavilion, not to mention the ordinary civil and military officials, even the emperor himself had to get off his horse, get off his sedan, and walk up the hundreds of steps. This kind of glory wasn't as simple as bringing honor to one's ancestors. It was a true legacy. who wouldn't be moved? Don't people live for fame and fortune? The glory of the Golden Scale Pavilion was the goal that civil and military officials would strive for their entire lives when they entered the imperial court. Wei Ci was a commoner, not a saint. Of course, he also wanted to, due to certain reasons. Wei Ci did not mention whether he had achieved this achievement or not. His lord did not ask too much either. Now that he was exposed, he felt bitter in his heart. Wei Ci looked dejected and sighed. Of course, there isn't. Jiang Pengji comforted him, it's okay. Even if you can't enter the civil and martial arts role of the Golden Scale Pavilion, entering the coffin of the #1 Empress in the world is still worth it. Live in the same quilt, die in the same hole? How would Wei Ci dare to think about it? In his previous life, less than 4 hours after His Majesty's ascension to the throne, that brat Wei Tsong was used by the landowning households. He brought people to force His Majesty to abdicate the throne and said that he was Crown Prince Zhangzhua. In such a dangerous situation, not to mention Wei Ci, even the Crown Prince Jiang Yan was very passive and was almost forced to a dead end. What else could Wei Ci do when his son, whom he had personally raised, did such a disgraceful thing? He was only a powerless grand tutor. The only thing he could do was insist that Wei Tsong was his biological son. He reprimanded his biological son for committing treason by impersonating the deceased Crown Prince Zhangzhua in an attempt to overthrow the universe. In the end, Wei Tsong committed suicide to atone for his crimes and followed the former emperor. As long as there was no evidence, Jiang Yan could seize the opportunity to attack and label Wei Tsong as a traitor. However, his only daughter had suffered because of this. Within a day, his mother passed away, his father committed suicide, his younger brother rebelled and was killed, and all his blood relatives were wiped out. Under such circumstances, if Jiang Yan didn't hate him, he would be grateful. Why would he ask Jiang Yan to bury his body in the imperial tomb? Wei Ci sighed, I'm just a lowly person, how would I dare to enter the emperor's mausoleum and serve His Majesty? Jiang Pengji squinted her eyes and pinched his face. You should just give up for the rest of your life. Don't even think about sleeping anywhere else besides my coffin. Wei Ci could not help but reveal a faint smile. Yes, Ci obeys. Jiang Pengji's boiling jealousy subsided. The two of them returned to the topic that had gone off the rails. We've gone off the rails. Let's continue talking about Yang Tao, Jiang Pengji said. Tell me more about his past life. Wei Ci did not dare to hide anything. However, when His Majesty subdued Yang Tao, Wei Ci was still working under An Shui. What he knew was what he found out later, and some parts were not very detailed. He said, I have some suspicions that Yan Lin was the one who planned Yang Tao's attack. Don't doubt it. It must be his masterpiece, Jiang Pengji said grumpily. But I don't think Yan Lin planned that far ahead. He did this to gain leverage for Yang Tao, so that he wouldn't be restricted and suppressed after he surrendered. What a touching brotherly bond. Even at a time like this, he didn't forget to plan for the greatest benefit for Yang Tao. After thinking about it, he ended up plotting against me. After sorting out Yan Lin's plan and confirming his opponent's purpose, the process was easy to understand. Yang Tao and Jiang Pengji had a grudge. Now that he only brought 20,000 soldiers to surrender, not only would she look down on him, but he would also be in a difficult position in the future. How could he improve Yang Tao's position in the future? Yan Lin racked his brains for a plan. Coincidentally, a perfect opportunity presented itself. If he could make good use of this opportunity, Yang Tao's future would be rich and prosperous. It turned out that the Nanxing rebel army that betrayed Yang Tao had surrendered to An Shui. As An Shui's vanguard, they tried to attack Zhangzhou, which was under Jiang Pengji's control. Yang Tao and his family were located in a city at the front line. It was not a place that the military would fight for, and the war was meaningless. Yang Si arranged for Yang Tao and his remaining soldiers to stay there so that they could be monitored and at the same time, wait for Jiang Pengji's army to arrive. He never expected that the Nanchang rebel army would target this place and use it as a springboard to test the waters. When Yang Tao and the others received the news that there were enemies outside the city, he was also dumbfounded. Yan Lin realized that this was a godsend opportunity. There were few soldiers guarding the city. There were only Yang Tao's remaining soldiers and the low-level veterans in the city. It would take some time for Yang Si's reinforcements to arrive. If Nanchang's enemy took the opportunity to launch a sneak attack on the city, the defenseless city would definitely fall. Needless to say, the consequences would be dire. If Yang Tao seized the opportunity to lead his troops to defend or even kill the invading enemy, he would have made a great contribution. Even if Jiang Pengji suspected that Yang Tao had led his troops to rebel, it would be fine. The more suspicious she was, the more advantageous it would be for Yang Tao later on. For the sake of her reputation and to appease Yang Tao's old subordinates, she had to treat Yang Tao well and ensure that his family would be wealthy. Whether it was in her previous life or this one, it was all part of Yan Lin's plan. However, Yan Lin probably didn't expect Yang Tao to use this opportunity to make a comeback. His gains were far more than he had expected. Wei Ci said, "If it wasn't you, my lord, but someone else, Yan Lin's plan would at most protect Yang Tao's wealth for the rest of his life." Jiang Pengji said, "Isn't Yan Lin's plan for this lifetime of wealth? From this point of view, he has achieved his goal." Even though she had been tricked, Jiang Pengji didn't feel angry. At most, she was a little depressed. At the same time, Yang Tao was also very nervous. But since his companion was so confident, he would go crazy with her. Just as Qian Su had said, Yan Lin dared to plot anything, but Yang Tao dared to believe in everything. Even though he knew that his plan would fail and that he would lose his life, he still dared to try. It wasn't that Yang Tao didn't have his own ideas. It was just that he trusted Yan Lin wholeheartedly. By now, Lu Shi should have received news of Zhengze leading his troops to rebel, right? Qian Su smiled bitterly. "Xiaoyang, aren't you afraid that Lu Shi will do something to my lord in a fit of rage?" Yan Lin smiled sarcastically. Chapter 1591. Qian Su sighed. "Because I'm not stupid. I thought you would be in danger. There were coincidences in the world, but most coincidences were driven by someone, such as Yan Lin's game of chess. Yang Tao had been extremely lucky in both lives. Even though the beginning and the process were different, the results were the same. Was it really history correcting itself? Not really. Among all the princes who had fallen from grace, Yang Tao was the only one with 90% luck. From a certain point of view, even Jiang Pengji, who was the last to ascend the throne, was not as lucky. After she ascended the throne, she plotted against the officials, the aristocrats, and the poor families for 18 years. Long Yubin, the Empress, almost lost a son and a daughter. On the other hand, Yang Tao was a winner in life. He held a high position, had many children, and finally enjoyed his old age. Of course, luck and coincidences played a part, but there was also a lot of planning and calculation. As Yan Lin's friend, Qian Su didn't dare to say he knew everything, but he knew 90% of what Yan Lin had been planning. Why did Nanchang's enemy choose the small town where Yang Tao was located? Why did Jiang Pengji's troops, who were monitoring Yang Tao's remaining troops, not discover the enemy's tracks? Why did the messenger send Jiang Pengji the news that Yang Tao was rebelling with his troops before all the details were clear? To put it bluntly, this was Yan Lin's plan. 30% of the time and 70% of the people had led to the current situation. All he wanted was to push Yang Tao to the safest position. Nanchang's enemy's original intention was not to attack the small town. Instead, they wanted to bypass the town and attack another place. Yan Lin discovered their tracks but did not tell anyone. Instead, he secretly sent someone to contact them and deceive them with promises, such as helping them open the city and surrender. To increase his credibility, he even revealed the location of several granaries under Jiang Pengji's control. Of course, Yan Lin did not know where Jiang Pengji's granaries were. This information was the most confidential of secrets. He had no right to know. However, Yan Lin was born and raised in Zhangzhou. He knew very well where the granaries were. Naturally, the enemy would not be able to see through it. On one hand, he lured the enemy to the small town, on the other hand, he detained the eyes and ears of the nearby army supervisors. This would hinder their judgment and make them think that Yang Tao had made a deal with Nancheng's enemy. Thus, they would make the wrong judgment and confuse both sides. When the enemy arrived at the city, Yan Lin would reason with Yang Tao and encourage him to wear leather armor for the sake of his family. He would lead his former troops and the old soldiers in the city to fight the enemy. One had to know that Yang Tao's current status was that of a feudal vassal who was waiting to formally surrender. In order to avoid danger, he had reduced his contact with his former vassals as much as possible, not to mention regaining his military power and leading troops to do anything. If there was a misunderstanding, the supervisor sent by Yang Si would suspect that Yang Tao was leading the troops to feign surrender. The consequences would be dire. However, as Yen, Su, would say, Yang Yen, Yang, Yang Lin, Yang, and could. Yang, Yen could. If. As, Yen Yang as, he as, and could as. The enemy was already at the gates of the city, but the army supervisor had yet to arrive. If Yang Tao did not think of a way to save himself, was he supposed to just watch the enemy take down this small city that was easy to attack but hard to defend, then capture his family and leave? Of course not. Even though Yang Tao had surrendered, his former troops were still loyal to him. They were willing to listen to his orders. The soldiers in the city had no opinion of their own. Outside the city, there were enemies everywhere. They had no choice but to listen to Yang Tao's orders. They had been tricked without knowing it. After doing all that, Yan Lin played a game of the thief calling the thief. According to the thinking of a normal person, they would usually slander the enemy. Who would suspect that they would slander themselves? Yan Lin took advantage of the lag of the news, the time difference, and the blind spots in his thinking. He made use of Yang Si to send Jiang Pengji the wrong information. Even if Yang Si came to his senses later and sent the correct information, Yan Lin would have achieved his goal. Qian Su was impressed by Yan Lin's audacity. If the information was leaked, Yang Tao would be fine, but Yan Lin might not. However, Yan Lin did not care. It's okay. I know what I'm doing. Qian Su said, it's good that you know how to protect yourself. Otherwise, if the Lord finds out, she will feel guilty. Yan Lin smiled. I have known the Lord for more than 20 years. We know each other. Even if he finds out, he will understand. After all, this was not the first time Yan Lin had cleaned up Yang Tao's mess since he was a kid. Yang Tao was used to it. Qian Su snorted and said sourly, I know you two are close friends. You don't have to brag about it in front of me. Yan Lin said, even if Lu Shi knows what happened, it is unlikely that he will blame me. Maybe this is an opportunity. The bigger Jiang Pengji's business was, the more talented people would try to get close to her. When there were more people, there would be less attention for each person. Naturally, there would be fewer opportunities. Apart from the old people, it would be much more difficult for new people to make a name for themselves. It would also be harder for them to get promoted and be put in an important position. Yan Lin was not a stubborn person. Assisting Yang Tao was his first choice. If he did not have this option, he would have chosen something else. If he could make a name for himself in Jiang Pengji's camp, it would be easier for him to take care of Yang Tao in the future. After all, he had to show respect for Yang Tao. If there were blind people who tried to harm Yang Tao, Yan Lin's power would more or less make the other party wary. What he was afraid of was that he did not have any cards up his sleeves. If he ran into trouble in the future, no one would be able to help him. Most of the time, staying aloof from the outside world did not mean staying away from it. Yan Lin had been living in a chaotic world for a few years. He knew what it felt like to be powerless. He was at the mercy of others and had no control over his own life. Whether it was for himself, for his family, or for Yang Tao, his sister, and his nephew, he had to do what he had to do. I hope you didn't make a mistake this time. Qian Su understood Yan Lin's difficulties. She could only smile bitterly and support him. Yan Lin smiled. I am not a god. How can I control everything? I just do my best and leave the rest to fate. While they were talking, Yang Tao had just finished clearing the battlefield. Although the terrain did not give them much of an advantage, the enemies of Nansheng were not elites. In Yang Tao's eyes, they were just a motley crew. It was just that they had more people. The two sides, one attacking and the other defending, fought for several days. The city gate was not broken, and the walls were not lost. Instead, they won several battles in a row. Because of the victory, Yang Tao's life was no longer in danger. He was in a much better mood. Xiaoyang, have you gotten in touch with the people outside? The outside that Yang Tao was referring to was the tens of thousands of soldiers and horses stationed nearby. Yan Lin said, I've sent someone to contact them. There should be a response. If we can defeat them before that, we won't have to worry about rumors. Yang Tao crossed his arms and said, okay, I got it. Qian Su was speechless. Chapter 1592. Who was the angriest about Yan Lin's scheme? Of course it wasn't Jiang Pengji. It was Yang Si, who had been stepped on and used by Yan Lin. Why are you so angry? Look at you. The waxes that the servants spent so much effort on are all gone now. Fengzhen smiled as he fanned himself with his golden fan. Recently, he had been in high spirits because of the happy occasion. Everyone he saw was pleasing to the eye, even Yang Si. He was just used by someone. You've tortured Yan Lin enough. Can't you let him retaliate once in a while? You're so petty. Yang Si stopped pacing and glared at him. It's not that simple. Does Yan Lin think I'm a 3-year-old? Even though it was an impromptu plan, Yan Lin's plan was flawless. Yang Si couldn't ignore the bigger picture even if he had doubts. A few days later, the situation became clear. Yang Si's suspicions were confirmed. He had indeed been set up. Who was the one who set him up? He didn't even have to think to know the person's name. Yan Lin had set up this trap. Yang Tao and Yan Lin were the ones who benefited in the end, but Yang Si was the one who suffered. Why did he say that? It was because Yang Si had sent messengers to deliver the news that Yang Tao was suspected of mutiny. As the Lord, Jiang Pengji made the wrong judgment and misunderstood Yang Tao. Even though she sent messengers to correct the news 2 days later, the Lord already knew what she needed to know. Normally, she would only think that Yang Si was incompetent. She wouldn't be angry at Yan Lin's ingenious plan. Yang Si had no choice but to swallow the loss. Even though it wasn't Yan Lin's main purpose, he had indeed been caught in the crossfire. If he had been a petty person, he would have hated Yan Lin for the rest of his life. You don't have to be so angry. Let's wait and see how the Lord reacts. Fengzhen was happy to watch the drama unfold. Yang Si had been the one watching Yan Lin set him up. Now that the tables had turned, it was finally Fengzhen's turn to watch Yang Si get set up. He was delighted. You followed her for 10 years. You know what kind of person she is. She might have seen through Yan Lin's plan. Don't worry. It would have been better if Feng Zhen hadn't said anything. Now that he said it, Yang Si felt even more annoyed. He was a member of the Lord's Brain Trust. He had been tricked by Yan Lin, but the Lord had seen through his plan. What did this mean? This meant that his advantage as a strategist was not as good as his Lord's. Then, what use did his Lord have for him? Yang Si said angrily, I don't hate Yan Xiaoyang anymore. No matter how I think about it, Feng Zisher's mouth is still the most detestable. Feng Zhen closed his gold-sprinkled fan, spread his arms, and shrugged his shoulders. He looked like he was saying, what can you do to me? Yang Si, no, his stomach hurts. When he thought about how he still had to work with Feng Zhen and Yan Lin for decades to come, he felt like he had nothing left to live for. Yang Xisheng was not the only one who felt hopeless. The Nanqing soldiers who led the attack were also so depressed that they wanted to vomit blood. They secretly cursed Yan Lin more than once. They had agreed to work together from the inside and outside, but in the end, the enemy came. The city gate was filled with archers who were ready for battle, and they were stunned in a single move. They didn't know the inside story, but when they saw the situation, they knew it was a trap. Logically speaking, they should have retreated as soon as possible to ensure their safety, but they didn't. This was all thanks to Yan Lin's ability to lie through his teeth. He said that Yang Tao's tens of thousands of old subordinates had long been transferred away by the petty Yang Si. Now, there were only tens of thousands of old, weak, sick, and disabled people in the city. The terrain was easy to attack, but difficult to defend. The Nanqing soldiers were coaxed by Yan Lin, and they tried to attack. The soldiers on the city wall were indeed veterans, but they worked well together. On the first day, they barely managed to defend the city. On the second day, they managed to defend the city by a narrow margin. The Nanqing soldiers were furious when they saw this. Just as they were about to retreat, Yan Lin sent another message. He said that he had received a secret report that a batch of provisions would arrive at midnight, and that the city was only a transit station. The Nanqing soldiers didn't believe him, but that night, they received news that many covered ships carrying provisions were entering the city by water. Qian Su didn't know that Yan Lin was so good at lying. The Nanqing soldiers knew that it was a trap, but they still jumped into it. At first, it was Yan Lin who coaxed them, but later, he was really angry. He was determined to take down the city. A few days before Jiang Pengji arrived with her troops, the self-directed drama finally came to an end. The people who suffered the most were not Yang Si or Yan Lin, but the Nanqing soldiers who were kept in the dark. No matter how many people they brought over, they were all killed. Yang Si sent people to search for evidence, but he didn't expect Yan Lin to be so cautious that he didn't leave any evidence. Even if there were letters, they were destroyed. Yang Si didn't have any witnesses or material evidence, so he couldn't accuse Yan Lin of plotting this farce. You're so calculative, Yang Si gritted his teeth and muttered. He was furious. If it wasn't for the fact that he couldn't beat Yan Lin, he would have taught him a lesson. Was Yang Si someone who could be tricked by anyone? Yan Lin stared at him with his pure and righteous eyes and asked, Messenger Yang, can you explain why the soldiers who were watching us didn't come to help when the Nanqing soldiers were at the city gate? Did they not receive the news, or did someone instruct them to delay the time? Yang Si sucked in a breath of cold air and ground his molars rhythmically. Yan Lin was a black-hearted man. He was the one who suppressed the news, detained the spies, and misled the army supervisor. How could he have the cheek to accuse Yang Si of holding a grudge and delaying the reinforcements? Not to mention Yang Si, even if Wei Ci were to be accused of this, Wei Ci would not be able to bear it. Yan Lin hadn't fully pledged himself to the Lord yet, and he was already making enemies? Yang Si sneered and said, You and I both know the inside story. Don't pretend to be innocent and pitiful. Yan Lin blinked innocently, as if he didn't understand Yang Xi's hint. When the two of them met, the atmosphere was like firecrackers. Yang Tao was confused. When Yang Xi walked over, Yang Tao asked his friend, Xiaoyang, "Didn't you have a good chat with Yang Jingrong? Why are you?" When Yang Tao decided to surrender, Yang Xi was the messenger to deal with the situation. He also brought Yan Lin along. He had always thought that Yan Lin and Yang Xi were scholars who appreciated each other. He didn't expect that they would become enemies this time. Yan Lin smiled and said, "It's just a small conflict. We can solve it by apologizing in person." "Zhengzi, don't worry." "How can I not worry? I heard that Yang Xi is very—" Yang Tao swallowed the word back down his throat. Everyone knew that Yang Xi held a grudge. Putting everything else aside, when Yang Xi kicked the First Lord, Prince Changshu, he almost caused him to bleed. He was a ruthless person. Yan Lin said, "It doesn't matter. He can't touch me unless he has something that will kill me. So what if he holds a grudge?" Chapter 1593. Fortunately, Yang Xi was not a roundworm in Yan Lin's stomach. Otherwise, if he knew what Yan Lin was thinking, he would probably explode in anger. What did Yan Xiaoyang mean? What did he mean by, "I'm good at pacifying, but I don't believe I can't handle Yang Xi"? Did he think he was a human or a dog? How could he use the word pacify? Because they didn't know, the two of them could get along peacefully and didn't get into a lawsuit. Feng Zhen was addicted to watching the drama. He wanted to join in no matter what. He was happy to see Yang Xi being humiliated. Yan Xiaoyang is on the Lord's list. If you want to take revenge on him, remember to take it easy. Feng Zhen was worried that Yang Xi would get into some kind of scandal when he grew up. If he didn't get rid of Yan Lin, he might get himself into trouble. Yang Xi glared at him and said sarcastically, "Since when did Feng Lingzi change? I can't believe you would say something like that. Advise him to take it easy?" How could Feng Zhen say that? How shameless could he be? How shameless. Even without Feng Zhen's warning, Yang Xi knew his limits. His lord could not stand betrayal and infighting. She could turn a blind eye to the small conflicts between the people in the tent and turn a blind eye to it. Occasionally, she would even be in the mood to watch the show or interfere. However, if things got out of hand, she would not allow it. The conflict between Yang Xi and Yan Lin hadn't escalated to that extent. At most, they would make a few sarcastic remarks. Speaking of conflicts, Yang Xi and Han Yu's were more serious than Yan Lin's, but they were still living in harmony. Feng Zhen tapped his folded fan against his palm and rolled his eyes in exasperation. "Yang Jingrong, you heartless girl. Who am I trying to persuade you for? Isn't it for you? When the conflict between you two reaches the Lord, you'll be the one who suffers in the end. If you don't say anything, the Lord will be partial to you. This is called advancing by retreating." Yang Xi said sarcastically, "You're pretending to be kind. Who doesn't know what kind of person the famous Feng Lingzi is?" The group of little princesses argued with each other every day. They hadn't fallen apart after so many years. They really admired Jiang Pengji's ability to control her subordinates. Jiang Pengji arrived at her destination 3 days earlier than scheduled. Everyone welcomed her in person. They hadn't seen each other for almost a year. Everyone was so jealous that they realized that their lord didn't seem to have changed much. Jiang Pengji dismounted from the horse's back and helped Fu Wang and the others up one by one. She realized that their skin had darkened by several degrees. She almost couldn't recognize them. She laughed and teased, "Did you all go to the coal mine to dig coal?" When Wei Ci, who was following behind her, heard this, his face turned green. Suddenly, he felt his throat itch. He wanted to cough a few times to wake his lord up. Fortunately, Jiang Pengji was reliable. She added another sentence after teasing him. It's tough on the front lines. My beloved generals, you've all worked hard. Feng Zhen, Yang Si, and the other scholars were still fine. At most, they had darkened by 1 or 2 degrees and looked a little thinner. However, Fu Wang and the other generals had changed a lot. It was as if they were eating soy sauce for dinner. It was not wrong to say that they had crawled out of the coal mine. Wei Si's worries were unnecessary. Fu Wang and the rest still did not understand their lord's temperament. It was just a few harmless teasing words. Fu Wang said righteously. It's my duty to expand the territory of the Lord. It's not hard work. This is not a proper occasion. There's no need to be so restrained. It will make people feel uncomfortable. Jiang Pengji was not a vain person. She did not need her subordinates to show their loyalty to her every now and then. Loyalty was not as important as words. She said to Fu Wang as if she was talking about family matters, "This is not the place to talk. Let's settle the soldiers of the 3 armies first. It's not too late to talk about proper matters later." Jiang Pengji had brought 50,000 troops and horses from Zhangjiang Pass this time. The remaining troops were enough to deal with the changes in Zhongzhou. Jiang Pengji did not need to personally settle the soldiers. Feng Zhen and the others would handle it for her. Fu Wang led her to the main city's manor. As soon as they sat down, Jiang Pengji asked Yang Tao about the rebellion. Fu Wang stammered for a while and looked at Yang Si. Yang Si cursed Yan Lin for the 100th time in his heart. He stepped forward to confess to Jiang Pengji and tried his best to defend himself against the accusation of failing to supervise. Jiang Pengji said, "There's no hurry to confess. Tell me what happened first." "At first, we received news that there was a rebellion. Then, we said it was a misunderstanding." She was well aware of the situation, but she still had to ask. She did not want to break the rules and create a bad atmosphere. It was one thing for Jiang Pengji to be well aware of the situation, but it was another for her subordinates to hide it from her. Yang Si felt bitter in his mouth. He picked out the key points and hid Yan Lin's scheme. Firstly, there was no witness or material evidence. It was not easy to accuse him. Secondly, Yang Si did not want to bring the conflict to Jiang Pengji. It would be too embarrassing. Personal grudges were personal grudges. He should not disregard public and private interests and take revenge indiscriminately. Jiang Pengji said calmly, "If that's the case, I'll fine you a month's salary. It's a small punishment but a great warning. Do you have any objections?" Yang Si's ears perked up. He knew that he was going to be the scapegoat. He did not expect his lord to feel sorry for him and let him off lightly. "I have no objections. I'm willing to accept the punishment." Yang Si's mood instantly brightened. He said seriously, "I will remember the lesson and will never do it again." What kind of punishment was a month's salary penalty? At most, it was just a show for outsiders. There was no real meaning to it. This showed that his lord was a discerning person. She knew the inside story, but she could not reveal it. For Yang Si, the punishment was not important. The most important thing was how his lord viewed him. As long as his lord knew that he was innocent, everything else could be ignored. In addition, everyone's salary was different from the usual monthly salary. Every month's salary was fixed, but there would be generous rewards and bonuses in July and January. His lord said that this was a reward every 6 months to encourage everyone's enthusiasm for making contributions. This was the bulk of the annual income. Compared to it, the monthly salary was nothing. According to his lord's temperament, she would definitely find an excuse to make it up to him if he was wronged. Yang Si was the one who benefited. The depression he had been feeling for the past few days was finally relieved. He felt refreshed. Jiang Pengji rested for a while. After she had a general understanding of the situation, she washed up and changed into a more formal outfit to meet Yang Tao. Although Yang Tao had surrendered, he was still a feudal lord in name. Jiang Pengji should give him the respect he deserved. How does my lord plan to settle Yang Tao? Wei Ci saw that there was still some moisture around her and her long hair was slightly damp. He took a dry cloth to dry her. How do I settle him? I'll just go with the flow. Jiang Pengji said, you know my current situation. There are too few capable commanders who can take charge of an area on their own. Yang Tao and Yan Lin have a close relationship. If I don't use Yang Tao, Yan Lin will not truly submit. It's better to take all of them. There were many capable old officials under Yang Tao. Jiang Pengji needed them. After dealing with Yang Tao, it would not be difficult to recruit these people. She could even tolerate Yang Tao, let alone Yang Tao's old subordinates. Chapter 1594. Wei Ci was a cautious and thorough person. He was already prepared for Jiang Pengji's question. Them? A portion of them are the private troops of the aristocratic families. The remaining 70% are the militia that was temporarily recruited. Wei Ci gently wiped her wet hair as he said, the Nanqing aristocratic families allocated a portion of their troops to Yang Tao to show their support for him. This defection allowed the Nanqing aristocratic families to proceed so smoothly and caused Yang Tao's army to be defeated and trapped. This portion played an important role. Fortunately, there were only slightly more than 3,000 elites. The rest were the militia that was temporarily recruited. They were used to make up the numbers and increase their influence. Otherwise, even if Yang Tao had Yan Lin's support, it would be difficult to defend the city. Is this true? Jiang Pengji raised her eyebrows slightly and the corners of her lips curled up. If that's the case, Yang Tao's loss was not undeserved. Wei Ci said, indeed, it was not undeserved. Jiang Pengji said, if you rely on someone, the mountain will collapse. If you rely on someone, you will run away. Doesn't he know this? When the Nanqing aristocratic families are of one mind with him and are willing to support him, the sword they lend to him is his. Once they betray him, the borrowed sword will no longer listen to them. It was precisely because some of the troops under Yang Tao's command were lent to him by the Nanqing aristocratic families that when the Nanqing aristocratic families betrayed Yang Tao's foundation collapsed so thoroughly. If not for this incident, even if the Nanqing aristocratic families wanted to bring people to incite Yang Tao's troops, it would not have been done overnight. Yang Tao might even have been able to kill them instead of helplessly choosing to surrender to Jiang Pengji. Historical experience taught people that things that concerned one's life should never be held in the hands of others. If Jiang Pengji was Yang Tao, even if she accepted the aristocratic family's aid and owed them a favor, Jiang Pengji would secretly change the group of people after she made her fortune. Soldiers that were not trained by herself were always separated by a layer. Who knew if their old master would secretly cause trouble? This was the difference between Jiang Pengji and Yang Tao. Wei Ci said coldly, although Yang Tao made some mistakes, and Shui is better. Otherwise, how could he persuade so many aristocratic families to defect? What ability does he have? He was just lucky and picked up a loophole. So what if he was born in the Nanqing aristocratic families? In the end, the Nanqing aristocrats favored Yang Tao, who was an outsider. If Yang Tao hadn't suffered such a huge loss at my hands and affected his value in the eyes of the landowning households, would Emir and Shui have been able to seize the opportunity to enter? He sent more than 10,000 soldiers to test our strength and defenses. Just this point alone is enough to make him look down on us. Where did these 10,000 soldiers come from? 30% of the troops were originally loaned to Yang Tao by the landowning households, and the remaining 70% were temporarily recruited militia. And Shui didn't even have to pay a single cent. Jiang Pengji couldn't help but mock him. She clearly told Wei Ci that she really didn't have a good impression of Shui. It was not only because of the other party's character and behavior, but also because he was Wei Ci's previous master in his previous life. Every time she thought of this, she felt uncomfortable all over. Was her family's Zixiao someone who could be oppressed by just anyone? Wei Ci advised, "My lord is right, but our military strength has been greatly depleted. We cannot let our guard down against Shui." Jiang Pengji fought with the Nie clan and Yang Tao at the same time. Even if she won, the loss of troops and financial resources was astronomical. She had run over to fight Shui before she had even recuperated. Even if Shui's vitality was also greatly depleted, she couldn't deal with him half-heartedly. She might fail miserably in an easy task. Jiang Pengji said with certainty, "I know this principle. It's better to be safe than sorry." After she finished speaking, she sighed comfortably. She tilted her head and leaned on Wei Ci's shoulder. She closed her eyes and rested. The tip of her nose lingered with the fragrance that belonged solely to Wei Ci. She didn't know what he used to wash his clothes, but Wei Ci's clothes carried a faint sandalwood fragrance all year round. When she sniffed it carefully, it seemed to have an indescribable coolness that had the effect of calming one's heart. Jiang Pengji liked it very much. When she sniffed it more, her mood would calm down. Wei Ci gently dried his long hair. It was probably too comfortable. His eyelids became heavier, and he started to feel sleepy. When Jiang Pengji had enough rest, her long hair, which had been slightly wet, was almost dry. Jiang Pengji took the opportunity to take advantage of him. She uttered free words of love one after another. Wei Ci was also used to her actions. Even if she wrapped herself around him like an octopus, he could still free up his hands to tie up her long hair. "My lord is really becoming more and more childish," Jiang Pengji said. "Zixiao is becoming more and more like a loving father. In the future, he will definitely be good at raising children." Wei Ci was speechless. How could he respond to that? Because she was busy, Jiang Pengji didn't meet Yang Tao that day. Instead, she chose the next day. That night, too many people tossed and turned restlessly because of various reasons. Yang Tao was needless to say. As the person who slept by his side, Yan Shuxian naturally knew her husband's situation, but she could only comfort him silently. "I don't know what will happen tomorrow." Yang Tao's voice carried a rare sense of confusion. He sounded like a child standing at the crossroads, looking around. He sounded a little fragile. Yan Shuxian turned sideways and looked at him. "No matter what the outcome is, I will accompany you. Wherever you go, I will go." Yang Tao scowled at her. "Nonsense. What if your husband goes to see the king of hell?" Yan Shuxian said, "Then I will look for you after I raise the child into an adult." Yang Tao was stunned. He hugged her even more tightly. The couple didn't speak for the whole night. Yan Lin was also restless. Yang Wuxia coaxed the child to sleep and found her husband drawing something on the brocade. "This is," Yan Lin said, "the great universal geographical map of some of Nanchung's prefectures. Our army retreated in a hurry, so we didn't bring many things with us." Smart people usually had good memories. Yan Lin was one of them. Even though he didn't have a photographic memory like Yang Si or Shi Zhong, he was still better than ordinary people. Many confidential documents were read carefully and memorized deeply before being destroyed. Things that were kept in one's mind were the least likely to be stolen and spied on. Yang Tao's surrender was a foregone conclusion. To prevent Jiang Pengji from underestimating him, Yan Lin set up a trap first and then presented her the great universal geographical map to help her conquer Nanchung. Yang Tao's situation would be much better then. Yang Wuxia sighed. "My husband has a lot of plans for my brother," Yan Lin said. "In this world, I only have you and your family. If I can't even protect you, the world will be so lonely and boring." That night, besides the few of them, and Shui and the others were also distraught. They had heard about Jiang Pengji's arrival in Zhangzhou with her troops. And Shui looked calm on the surface, but he was extremely agitated. And Shui had known Jiang Pengji since before she made a name for herself. He had seen her rise from a lowly county magistrate to a lord of a country. Now that she was pointing a butcher's knife at his weakness, it was impossible for Shui not to feel pressured, but he couldn't show any fear. When he was distraught, Shui went to his confidant for a solution to gain a sense of security. Hua Yuan talked with him for the whole night. They carefully analyzed the advantages and disadvantages of both sides. The candle flame burned throughout the night. Before dawn, someone outside the tent reported that the military counselor Lu Zheng was looking for Shui. Shui left Hua Yuan's tent and the latter stood up to send him off. Chapter 1595. Lu Zheng found an excuse to send Shui away. He no longer hid his disgust for Hua Yuan, and his entire body was filled with wariness. Ever since Zheng found out that Hua Yuan had lost his mind, he had secretly read up on many related medical skills and unofficial history stories. Combining his own judgment and his observation of Hua Yuan, Zheng felt that Hua Yuan was not only mentally ill, but also very dangerous. He should not be casually approached. Lu Zheng had once gone to Hua Yuan with a sword in hand, but Hua Yuan kept saying that he was Lu Shi, the Duke of Lanting. At first, Lu Zheng thought it was ridiculous, but after a period of close observation, he shuddered. When an ordinary person fell ill, they would at most go crazy and ramble nonsense, saying who they were, as if they were possessed by a spirit. However, Hua Yuan's insanity was more serious than what Lu Zheng knew. He did not ramble or go crazy. Instead, his speech was sharp, and his thoughts were clear. Lu Zheng boldly probed and discovered that every time Hua Yuan fell ill, he would assume a different identity. For example, Hua Yuan's brother, Hua Yuan's wife, his wife's lover, Gu Lin, Lu Shi. He had never even heard of some of them. They all appeared at different times. At first, Lu Zheng thought that he was possessed by a spirit, but when Hua Yuan said that he was Lu Shi, Lu Zheng knew that the other had gone completely crazy. He seemed clear-headed and rational, but he was actually so crazy that he had lost his sense of self. He had truly imagined himself to be someone else. Because of this, Lu Zheng could not understand his lord's decision. Why would he use a madman who had lost his mind and let this madman teach the young master? Even though the young master was Shui's adopted child from a side branch and not his own, Shui had injured his body during his early years in exile. It was impossible for him to have children of his own. If there were no accidents, this young master who had been adopted would be the future heir. Shui should treat him seriously. Lu Zheng's thoughts were complicated and tangled. He could not figure out the crux of the matter. Before he could solve these puzzles, he discovered something even more horrifying. It was as terrifying as seeing a ghost in broad daylight. One day, he received a letter asking for help from Hua Yuan. There was no mistaking it. It was indeed a letter from Hua Yuan asking for help. The letter was stained with the fragrance of rouge, and the handwriting was extremely gentle. It was obvious that it was written by a woman at a glance. The signature was even more confusing. It was actually written by Hua Yuan's sister-in-law, and every word was filled with tears. Lu Zheng could not hold back his curiosity and activated it. In private, he met Hua Yuan, who was full of femininity. "You wrote this letter to me? Why did you call for help?" Hua Yuan used her sleeve to wipe away the tears at the corners of her eyes. She had a feminine look on her face, and her sitting posture was like a pretty daughter from a humble family. Lu Zheng was not used to seeing this. The man lowered his voice, making it sound a little shrill. He even gave Lv Zheng a standard female salute. The moment Hua Yuan spoke, Lu Zheng knew that something was wrong. My surname is Wei, and my husband's surname is Hua. I married Hua Yuan a few years ago and gave birth to his children. Even if I didn't make any contributions, I still worked hard. Who would have thought that Hua Yuan would go crazy and attack me and my children when the Nanman people were attacking the city? I'm really wronged. Hua Yuan started crying as he spoke. Lu Zheng looked carefully at his actions and expression. He looked like a woman from an aristocratic family who had suffered a lot. Lu Zheng had investigated Hua Yuan and knew that his wife's surname was Wei. They had a son and a daughter. However, he heard that Hua Yuan's wife was dissolute and often took advantage of Hua Yuan's illness to find a lover to spend the night with. Therefore, it was still a question mark as to who the biological father of this pair of children was. Lu Zheng finally understood that Hua Yuan's illness was acting up again. Was he imagining that he was the wife who had been killed by him? Why are you looking for me? You said that someone wants to kill you. What's going on? Lu Zheng's heart was especially strong, and his ability to accept things had also increased several times. The person who claimed to be Hua Yuan's wife was crying. Her face was filled with endless horror. She trembled and said, "That person is Lu Shi." Lu Zheng, military advisor Lu, you must save me. I found out that the man was standing behind me with a saber in his hand. Lu Zheng shuddered involuntarily. He resisted the nausea and pulled his hand back. When Hua Yuan grabbed him with both hands, he realized that the other party's palms were covered in sticky and cold sweat. The feeling was so disgusting that the hair on his arms stood on end. Madam Wei, it's broad daylight. Don't scare people. There was no one behind Hua Yuan. It was empty, not to mention the knife-wielding Lu Shi. Did people who had lost their minds all behave like this when their illness acted up? As soon as he finished speaking, Hua Yuan's body suddenly convulsed. He let out a scream of pain that sounded like he was on the verge of death. It was loud and sharp, and Lu Zheng was so frightened that his whole body trembled. Lu Zheng could not help but raise his hand to touch his chest. Hua Yuan, who was sitting opposite him, returned to his usual cold and sharp self. Hua Yuan, do you really not need to see a doctor to look at your brain? Lu Zheng suggested sincerely. Hua Yuan, who had come online, snorted coldly and strode away with a wave of his sleeve. 2 days later, Lu Zheng received another letter asking for help from Hua Yuan. It was signed by a name that was not unfamiliar to him. Hua Yuan was one of his wife's lovers. He was suspected to be the biological father of their 2 children. So what if your illness is acting up? Is there a need to imagine that you're the lover of your wife who cheated on you? Lu Zheng scratched his hair anxiously. He sighed and went to meet up with Hua Yuan. Once again, he saw Hua Yuan kneeling by his feet, crying and hugging his legs. His face was smeared with snot and tears. Why are you looking for me? Could it be that Lu Shi is also here to kill you? Lu Zheng was speechless. He felt that if he interacted with Hua Yuan too much, he would become a lunatic sooner or later. The personality who claimed to be Hua Yuan's wife's lover said in horror and fear, "Yes, how did you know? Please save me. I don't want to die. As long as you save me, I'll immediately ask my servant to give you 1,000 taels of silver." "No, 10,000 taels will do." Lu Zheng looked coldly at Hua Yuan, who was crying and throwing a tantrum. His heart was unperturbed and he even felt like laughing. The other party cried again, that Lu Shi, that lunatic has already killed a few people." Lu Zheng was shocked. He asked tentatively, "Who did he kill?" The other party trembled as he named 4 to 5 people. The one who was recently killed was Hua Yuan's wife. "How did Lu Shi kill you?" Lu Zheng asked curiously. The other party said, "I saw it with my own eyes. That lunatic killed people and ate them alive, ate, as soon as he finished speaking, the other party let out a shrill scream. He looked like a dying man with his goldfish eyes wide open. Lu Zheng's hair stood on end as he listened to Hua Yuan. After a while, he saw Hua Yuan, who was lying on the ground, slowly get up and return to his familiar cold self. Wait! Lu Zheng stopped him this time. I know you're crazy, but what's with Lu Shi killing people? Chapter 1596. Lu Zheng asked him, May I ask, who are you now? Hua Yuan said, This body belongs to my younger brother. Who do you think I am? Lu Zheng understood. Hua Yuan was imagining that he was his younger brother who had died young again. You won't be the one asking for help next time, will you? How much money did he owe Hua Yuan in his previous life? No. Hua Yuan's brother said sarcastically, Only those spineless good-for-nothings will ask you for help. Lu Zheng asked again, What do you think will happen to the people killed by Lu Shi? If they're killed, of course they're dead. The other party retorted, What else do you think? Hua Yuan's condition was very serious. In fact, there were more split personalities than the ones Wei Ci knew of. There were many other weaker personalities that had no chance of appearing. These personalities were weak, timid, and had weak abilities. They were no match for the Lu Shi personality. The earlier the split personality appeared, the stronger it was, and the longer it would appear. For example, Hua Yuan's brother and Golin. The personality Lu Shi did not attack these people. Instead, he chose to devour the weaker personalities to strengthen himself and find an opportunity to take over. After all, in this personality's mind, he was the real Lu Shi. However, he was framed and then taken over. In order to take back everything he had, the personality Lu Shi had to have a real body. Getting rid of the other personalities was the first task. Lu Zheng did not understand this, but he vaguely guessed something. He suddenly felt a headache coming on. The so-called Lu Shi, brother, lover, wife, were all fake people that Hua Yuan had imagined when he was sick. In essence, they were all Hua Yuan himself. What a powerful man. Not only did he cheat on himself, he even wanted to kill himself. Impressive. After a while, Lu Zheng received another letter from Hua Yuan, but this time it was not a letter asking for help. Who are you? Lu Zheng looked at Hua Yuan's face. The other party's eyes were sinister and his thin lips were tightly pursed. This was definitely not Hua Yuan himself. It was more like the guy who had almost strangled Lu Zheng to death. Lu Zheng hesitated for a while and asked tentatively, You are Golin? Golin was someone who insisted on slaughtering hundreds of thousands of innocent people in Nanman, and even sent people to abort the pregnant women of Nansheng who were captured alive. Lu Zheng hated Hua Yuan even more than Hua Yuan himself. However, when he thought about how Hua Yuan was a lunatic, he felt very conflicted. How innocent were those women and children? They were originally women of Nansheng, but because of the incompetence of the men in this country, foreign invasions had caused them to become sacrifices of war. His entire body was only left with the function of catharsis, lust, and fertility. He was abused by the southern barbarians. After she got pregnant, she was abandoned by the original Nansheng people. Just because they had the blood of the southern barbarian tribe flowing in their veins, they had to beat the children in their wombs and kill them both. Recognizing that the Hua Yuan in front of him was Golin, he immediately lost the intention to talk. It was already good enough that he didn't pull out his sword and stab this son of a bitch to death. Don't you want to know why I called you here? Lu Zheng didn't want to talk to him, but Golin took the initiative to talk to him. Lu Zheng sneered. Could it be that Lu Shi wants to kill you as well? Golin said, Yes, I've been avoiding her for a long time, but I have a premonition that I'll be killed by her in the end. Lu Zheng asked, What does that have to do with me? If Gulin died, it would be very satisfying. At the same time, Lu Zheng would also be able to take revenge for the time when he was almost killed. Gulin sneered. That's Lu Shi. Lu Zheng was puzzled. So what? Gulin said, Lu Shi is a Duke of Dongqing, right? She doesn't have a good impression of your master. After hearing this, Lu Zheng's heart skipped a beat. He finally realized what was wrong. Gulin revealed a mocking smile and said, You've probably realized that I'm Gulin, but also not Gulin. Every split personality would initially be certain of their own identity. When they began to doubt themselves, they wouldn't be far from breaking down. Although Hua Yuan was a lunatic, he had the instinct to protect himself. As more and more split personalities appeared, he would subconsciously try to save himself. For example, he would split into a stronger personality, which could swallow up all the other personalities. When Hua Yuan went to Dongqing and saw Jiang Pengji, the personality in his body trembled in fear under her spiritual aura. Therefore, Hua Yuan's self-preservation could split into Lu Shi. Unexpectedly, this Lu Shi's self-consciousness was stronger and more terrifying than the other personalities. She wanted to take over the main personality. When she swallowed up all the split personalities, she might be able to replace the main personality. When that time came, who would be the most dangerous person? Of course, it would be Shui. Lu Zheng said, Of course I realized it. What's the point of saying this? Gulin said, Of course it's to ask you for a favor. Pull out your sword and kill me. Lu Zheng was puzzled. His hand that was holding the sword was a little hesitant. Why? Why? Of course it's because I want to end my life with dignity while I'm still conscious. Hua Yuan is a pitiful, sad, and hateful person. It's better to die early than to live. At least it's a relief. Gulin sneered. If you don't do it now, you'll regret it sooner or later. With that, Gulin turned around and left. In the next few days, Lu Zheng didn't see him again. Not only Gulin, but also Hua Yuan's brother, who often appeared, was nowhere to be seen. Instead, he was replaced by the deity Hua Yuan, who was in low spirits and often looked tired. The people that Hua Yuan imagined all had distinct personalities. It wasn't difficult to distinguish them. Compared to the vengeful, cruel, and cunning brother, the deity Hua Yuan was gentle and amiable. It was just that he was introverted and a little weak. Lu Zheng asked curiously about Hua Yuan's recent life. The other party's answer shocked Lu Zheng. Hua Yuan said, Nothing much happened recently. It's just that I'm often awakened by nightmares. Nightmares? What kind of nightmares are they? Hua Yuan smiled weakly and bashfully. It was as if he was embarrassed to be awakened by a nightmare. In the dream, there seemed to be a woman chasing after me with a knife. I was repeatedly forced into a desperate situation. Alas, it's really terrifying. The bad feeling in Lu Zheng's heart grew stronger until he saw traces of Lu Shi in Hua Yuan. When Lu Shi was young, he had studied in Langyi for 3 years. Naturally, Lu Zheng had seen him. The two of them had interacted a lot. When Hua Yuan revealed a wanton smile that was exactly the same as that person's, Lu Zheng knew that the situation was not good. However, this Lu Shi was very skillful. He was the #1 person in Shui's camp and was trusted by Shui. Under the suppression of the other party, Lu Zheng, an old official, was instead being marginalized. He could barely say anything in front of Shui. Lu Zheng almost vomited blood. What did this imposter, Lu Shi, want to do? When he heard that Lu Shi and Shui talked through the night about the strategic layout of Dongqing, Lu Zheng was in a bad mood. Chapter 1597. Who exactly are you now? Lu Zheng looked at Hua Yuan warily. His expression was solemn, as if he would draw his sword and fight to the death if anything went wrong. Hua Yuan's lips curled into a sarcastic smile. To him, Lu Zheng's wariness was more like the feeble struggle of a stranded fry. Lu Xiaoyin, who do you think I am? Hua Yuan's tone had changed. It was not as gentle as Nanxing Yaian's. It sounded more like someone from Hejian County in Dongqing. Do you really think you're Lu Shi? You're just a figment of Hua Yuan's imagination after he lost his mind. Lu Zheng gritted his teeth and said the words that could provoke Hua Yuan the most. If he allowed this lunatic Hua Yuan to continue jumping around, who knew what trouble he would cause? It was better to let him have his lunchbox as soon as possible. If you're really Lu Shi, why don't you recall your experiences since you were young? After all, it was just a figment of his imagination and not the real person. Many memories were blurry and missing. Hua Yuan could collect Jiang Pengji's life experiences and simulate her personality, behavior, and habits. However, it was impossible for Hua Yuan to know everything about Jiang Pengji's childhood, adolescence, and youth. That was a flaw. As expected, Hua Yuan's expression changed after Lu Zheng said that. Lu Zheng continued to provoke Hua Yuan with his words while guarding against Hua Yuan's sudden attack. You say you're Lu Shi. Do you remember when I was studying in Langjia County and we had a drink at Wangshan Pavilion? What did we talk about in that pavilion? Lu Zheng said word by word. You can't answer me because you're not Lu Shi. You're Hua Yuan, from Nanxing Ningzhou. You have parents and an elder brother. Your twin brother died before he could even reach the age of teeth. Your parents contracted an epidemic and passed away before you could reach the age of enlightenment. Your family business was taken away by your uncle and aunt. On the surface, they treated you well, but they secretly used dirty tricks to cripple you. You became a coward and married a slut that they had carefully chosen as your wife. This woman had an affair with someone else and gave birth to a son and a daughter. Because you were too cowardly, you didn't dare to resist. Hua Yuan, this is the real you. The current you is just an illusion. Hua Yuan's original body was a person who was gentle to the point of being weak. He didn't know how to fight back, but he was unwilling to accept the current situation. He didn't want to be bullied and humiliated. Therefore, he split from Hua Yuan's original body, which was vengeful, cunning, and cruel. Gulin was somewhat related to Hua Yuan. His life was miserable, but his martial arts were excellent. Hua Yuan sympathized with his experience and envied his ability. Perhaps it was because of this that Gulin was split. The remaining personality was more like a bug born from an unstable emotional state. Their existence placed a heavy burden on Hua Yuan. In order to protect himself, Hua Yuan instinctively split off Lu Shi to restrain them. The reason was simple. When Hua Yuan faced Jiang Pengji, his personality was trembling in fear. Who would have thought that this personality would be so dangerous? Not only could it devour the weaker personalities, but it could also threaten the main personality and take over its place. Lu Zheng didn't know the details, but according to his speculations, what he knew was not far from the truth. You're not Lu Shi at all. You're a lunatic who's lost his mind but doesn't know who you are. As soon as Lu Zheng finished speaking, Hua Yuan suddenly jumped up and snatched the sword from his hand. He clutched Lu Zheng's neck with a ferocious look on his face. Do you think I'll believe you just based on your words alone? If you spout nonsense again, I'll kill you. Hua Yuan suppressed his voice and faintly trembled with a hint of madness. It made people's hearts tremble. He panted and said, "Of course I'm Lu Shi. As long as I kill the person who impersonated me, I'll be the one and only Lu Shi. Lu Xiaoyin, if you get in my way again, don't blame me for disregarding our friendship as schoolmates." As soon as he finished speaking, Hua Yuan grabbed Lu Zheng's collar and threw him to the side. Lu Zheng lost his footing and grabbed the tent in his confusion. He fell to the ground pathetically. If it wasn't for the fact that the tent had been set up skillfully and was sturdy and stable, Lu Zheng would have knocked him over. Lu Zheng crawled up pathetically, his left hand tightly gripping the sword. He snorted heavily, flicked his sleeves, and left. This matter had to be reported to the Lord. Hua Yuan was now a lunatic who could take someone's life at any time. If she insisted on keeping him alive, Hua Yuan would probably assassinate An Shui and kill him before Jiang Pengji could lead her troops to attack. If that was really the case, it would be the biggest joke in the world. Lu Zheng's thoughts were not wrong, but An Shui had already been warned by Hua Yuan. An Shui didn't take Lu Zheng's worries to heart. Not only did he not take it seriously, but he also wanted to laugh. He had seen what a lunatic looked like. Hua Yuan's thoughts were clear and his abilities were outstanding. How did he look like a lunatic? If all the lunatics in the world were like him, would normal people still have a way out? Lu Zheng didn't know that when Hua Yuan sought refuge with An Shui, he had voluntarily revealed his background. At that time, it was his blood brother who had come online. The blood brother told An Shui that he was Hua Yuan's twin brother. Because one of them had died young, they couldn't bear to part with the other, so they shared the same body. The two of them had different personalities and habits. Instead, they were regarded as lunatics who had lost their minds by some unreasonable people. At that time, An Shui was short of manpower. Lu Zheng had just sought refuge with him. He hadn't figured out Lu Zheng's capabilities, so he had reservations. When An Shui saw that Hua Yuan had taken the initiative to seek refuge with him, that he was clear-headed, and that he was a talent. He didn't show any signs of insanity, so he believed Hua Yuan's words. All these years, Hua Yuan had kept it a secret very well. An Shui also relied on him greatly. He didn't believe any slanderous words of insanity. Lu Zheng was so anxious that blisters formed at the corners of his mouth, but An Shui remained unmoved. While Lu Zheng was disappointed, he could only find another way to reduce the harm Hua Yuan would cause. For example, he could transfer Hua Yuan away from the young master's side and then think of a way to drive a wedge between An Shui, the young master, and Hua Yuan apart. However, the first step of this plan was aborted. An Shui trusted Hua Yuan. Similarly, he didn't think much of this young master, who had been adopted. He didn't understand Lu Zheng's painstaking efforts. Instead, he felt that Lu Zheng was trying to stir up trouble. When he thought about what Hua Yuan had done to him, he didn't like Lu Zheng. Lu Zheng wasn't stupid. When his persuasion didn't work, he knew that An Shui wouldn't change his mind. How infuriating! Lu Zheng returned to his tent. He was so angry that he wanted to smash something to vent his anger. In the end, he held it in. "Sir, why doesn't the Lord believe your words?" Lu Zheng's servant had followed him from Dongqing to Nansheng. He had seen all sorts of ups and downs over the years. The servant couldn't understand why An Shui, who had always been well-behaved and thirsty for talent, would be like this. This was too different from how An Shui had looked when he begged Lu Zheng to come out of seclusion. Chapter 1598. Lu Zheng had agreed to An Shui too hastily. He had wanted to erase An Shui's pride and bad habits as an aristocrat before agreeing to become an official. An obedient and dependable lord was much better than a fool who liked to think he was smart but was full of problems. In the end, the plan could not keep up with the changes. Firstly, the situation did not allow for further delay. Secondly, An Shui's acting talent was top-notch. Now, Lu Zheng had tasted the bitter fruit. Ever since the four factions of Nanman were destroyed, An Shui had ambushed the allied armies under the suggestion of Lu Zheng and the others. He had taken over their military forces and territories and had expanded several times over. Too much expansion had caused An Shui to float up to the sky. The aristocratic bloodline in his bones had started acting up. This was because Hua Yuan spent most of his time giving advice and suggestions, while Lu Zheng was managing the internal affairs of the secular world. They did not have as many opportunities to show their faces as the former. As time passed, An Shui did not think much of Lu Zheng, who had once assisted him. He even felt that Lu Zheng was an eyesore and dispensable. Lu Zheng's ancestral home was in Dongqing. He had only agreed to become an official because An Shui had urged him many times. His ancestors were hunters and he was born poor. Hua Yuan's ancestral home was in Nanxing Ningzhou. He was the descendant of a typical aristocratic family. Even though he had experienced hardships and his family business had been taken away by his uncle and aunt, he was still an aristocratic family. Hua Yuan had taken the initiative to side with An Shui. His thoughts, interests, and standpoint were all highly in line with An Shui's. For example, slaughtering the innocent people of the four factions of Nanman and aborting the Nanman bloodline in a pregnant woman. They had a common enemy and it was easier to resonate with them. On the other hand, Lu Zheng had opposed An Shui's slaughter of the Nanman captives more than once. Considering their friendship, it was fine once or twice. But Lu Zheng had been an eyesore too many times. How could An Shui not hold a grudge against him? Lu Zheng knew these principles. But there were some things that he had to do even though he knew it was impossible. If everyone did not even have the courage to speak the truth for the sake of flattery and self-protection, what would be left in this world? The boy servant and Lu Zheng were of one mind. Seeing his teacher's situation, he was rather worried. Seeing this, Lu Zheng said in amusement, "Why are you so worried?" The boy servant said, "I'm just worried that you'll be at a disadvantage." Lu Zheng said, "Where have you been reading all the books I've taught you? Don't you know what it means to use a gentleman for those who know him and a woman for those who like her? If Nduoshi treats me as a national scholar, I will certainly repay him as a national scholar. If you treat me like grass, humph." This was Lu Zheng's temperament. In his previous life, he had fought to the death for his former master. In the end, he had cursed Jiang Pengji and jumped off the city wall to resist with his life. That was because his former master was worth risking his life for. Right now, An Shui and Lu Zheng were not compatible, and An Shui could not make Lu Zheng risk his life for him. Lu Zheng could only do his part. It would be best if An Shui was willing to listen to his advice, but if he wasn't willing, then it was up to him whether he wanted to listen or not. The errand boy was stunned. Lu Zheng snapped, "The head on your teacher's neck is very precious." Oh. I understand." Seeing that his page boy had gone to work, Lu Zheng felt a sense of helplessness and heaviness in his heart. His brows were still tightly knitted. At that moment, Lu Zheng's mood was a little complicated. In the words of the audience in the streaming room, An Shui was like an account that he had painstakingly leveled from a whiteboard to the maximum level. He had added equipment to this account, increased his battle-level reputation, and bought a cool appearance. In the end, the account had been snatched away by a fellow with the same account. Although Lu Zheng was depressed, he did not have a deep relationship with this account. Naturally, there was no situation where he had to be the owner. At the very most, he would just have to level up another account, or collect a completed main account. On the other side of the conversation, An Shui's side was in chaos, while Jiang Pengji's side was very harmonious. In order to show her seriousness, Jiang Pengji had spent a lot of effort on her attire. She had been pulled out of her warm bed early in the morning. "If my lord is tired, close your eyes and rest for a while," Wei Ci gently whispered in her ear. Jiang Pengji's eyes were half closed, and she responded vaguely. "Speaking of which, if I were to ascend the throne in the future, would I have to wake up so early to attend court every day? Would it be so tiring?" Wei Ci said, "There are major and regular court meetings. Major court meetings are held every New Year's Day, winter solstice, and Her Majesty's birthday to be worshipped by hundreds of officials in the main hall. Regular court meetings are more casual, and their schedule is more flexible. If my lord feels tired, it's better to set the time a little later. Naturally, they had to be fully armed during the major court meetings. Their attire had to fully display the majesty of the royal family. Regular court meetings were more casual. Their attire was more inclined towards daily life. It was impossible for them to spend an hour or even an hour every day to dress up. How could they have so much time to waste? Jiang Pengji said, "I feel much more at ease after hearing what you said." Wei Ci laughed and said, "My lord is starting to worry about the days after you ascend the throne?" Jiang Pengji said with a smile, "Isn't it because I'm afraid that I'll wake up too early and have too little time to pester you?" Wei Ci held it in for a long time before he squeezed out 4 words. "Be careful of your words and actions." Her good mood for the day began with playing with Zixiao. Jiang Pengji slept very soundly last night, but Yang Tao and the others tossed and turned in bed, unable to sleep. They endured intermittently until dawn. When the two parties met, Jiang Pengji looked Yang Tao up and down. Once again, she confirmed one thing: this was indeed a world that valued appearance. Almost none of the leaders of the feudal vassals were ugly. Their looks were all above average. Yang Tao's looks even exceeded the 90 mark. Didn't they see the group of salted fishes in the live stream who were obsessed with looks? Their eyes had seen thousands of ships, and they had seen all kinds of beauties. But as long as they could truly pick someone, they would definitely be a real beauty. Yang Tao's looks could withstand their nitpicking, which was like using a magnifying glass. He was definitely a natural handsome guy. Yang Tao was good-looking, and the few people behind him also had their own merits. Tudu Feichio, TSK, it doesn't seem like an official occasion to accept Yang Tao's surrender. It's more like the streamer is choosing a man. Qingfeng Wangyue, ha ha ha, now that you put it that way, isn't Beauty Ci the Empress? The salted fishes laughed and laughed, but Jiang Pengji could not be so casual. Back then, she had used the Oath of Alliance to recruit Huang Song, which completely reassured Huang Song and his former subordinates. Now that she was recruiting Yang Tao, she naturally could not be careless. No matter how extravagant one's words were, they could not compare to a black word on a piece of white paper. Today, they said that they had accepted Yang Tao's surrender, but the main topic was still to discuss the contents of the Oath of Alliance. Although Yang Tao was the defeated party, Jiang Pengji did not embarrass or humiliate him. Instead, she showed her sincerity. She even personally thanked Yang Tao for leading the troops to repel the invading Nansheng army and protect the city. She did not mention anything about what Yan Lin and the others had done. Yang Si, who was sitting at the lower seat, was not very happy. But when he remembered that his lord was biased towards him, he did not argue with Yan Lin and the others. Jiang Pengji showed her sincerity, and Yang Tao's side naturally knew what was good for them. Therefore, the atmosphere was quite harmonious. Chapter 1599. Xiaoyang, why do you think Lu Shi suddenly made such a request? Because Jiang Pengji was sincere enough, and Yang Tao didn't cause any trouble, the oath was quickly confirmed. Both parties were very satisfied. Yang Tao's old subordinates were originally worried about their futures, but now they were relieved. Yang Tao didn't feel completely at ease, because he didn't understand Jiang Pengji's request. Did she trust him, or did she want to take the opportunity to kill him? Lord Zhengzi, you don't have to worry, Qian Su couldn't call Yang Tao Lord now, even if she hadn't changed her boss. After all, this was Jiang Pengji's territory. It was for Yang Tao's own good, to reduce the possibility of Jiang Pengji suppressing him. Two tigers couldn't live on the same mountain, so Jiang Pengji could be the lord. Qian Su wasn't Yang Tao's guest. After choosing, he chose a respectful title that didn't alienate or overstep. Yang Tao crossed his arms. He didn't find anything wrong with Qian Su's change of title. He sighed. When my father was still here, he said that Lu Shi wasn't a person who could be judged by common sense. Now that I look at it, my father was right. I really don't understand Lu Shi's actions. Xiaoyan, did you see anything? Yang Tao's IQ was slightly higher than that of a normal person, but compared to a strategist who specialized in scheming, he was still a long way off. Anyway, he had a ready-made external brain, and he had a chance to ask for help, so Yang Tao didn't waste his time. Qian Su said, the oath of alliance was just made. If Lu Shi really had evil intentions, she wouldn't have shown it now. There are many benefits to treating Lord Zhengzhou well. Not only can you successfully incorporate your old subordinates, but you can also win a good reputation in front of the world. Yang Tao said, I know this, but I just don't know what she's trying to do. After all, he had been a lord for so many years. Yang Tao had been influenced by what he saw and heard and learned a lot of scheming and strategies. He was not as naive as he was when he was young. However, he could not see through Jiang Pengji's plan to let him have military power after he surrendered. She was so ambitious. Wasn't she afraid that Yang Tao would use his charisma to win over the soldiers and secretly seize military power? Then he would jump out and cause trouble when Jiang Pengji was slacking? Qian Su had a guess in her heart, but she couldn't say it out loud in front of Yang Tao. Yang Tao said, if you have any guesses, just say them. Do I look like someone who's difficult to talk to? Perhaps it was because he had shed his identity as the Lord, Yang Tao, and now had an empty title but no real power. He no longer had to maintain his bearing like before, and his words and actions had become casual. He even put his hand on Qian Su's shoulder while withstanding his companion's death ray. Qian Su walked properly, her back was ramrod straight, and her eyes were looking straight ahead. On the other hand, Yang Tao was swaying left and right, as if someone had pulled out his backbone. Qian Su wanted to say something, but Yan Lin spoke for him. Lu Shi. She probably wants to recruit you. Qian Su heaved a sigh of relief. He had been suppressing this thought in his heart, and it had almost caused him to suffocate. Yang Tao blinked in confusion. He pointed at himself and said, didn't I swear an oath of allegiance to her? My lord, by swearing an oath of allegiance, you mean that you will be pampered by Lu Shi like Huang Song. You will be a carefree rich man who doesn't care about anything. When Lu Shi ascends to the throne in the future, he will give you an empty title so that your descendants can live in ignorance. Yan Lin snorted coldly. I'm afraid Lu Shi wants you to become her subordinate. If you completely surrender to her, it's hard to say what will happen in the future. The former was a waste of time, but at least there was a guarantee. To put it bluntly, it was an iron rice bowl where you could eat, drink, and wait for death. The latter still had room for advancement, but the price was that you would have to pay for it by bowing down to your former opponent. In the future, you would have to be twice as afraid of your former opponent. Since ancient times, those who had made great contributions to their lord did not have a good ending. If the person who had made great contributions to their lord and held the military power was their former opponent, the whole clan would not be able to live in peace. Yang Tao finally caught up with their train of thought. He rubbed his chin and said, Lu Shi really didn't hurt his head these past few days? Yan Lin said, Lu Shi probably knew that Xiaoyang wouldn't agree immediately, so he used your familiarity with Nansheng as an excuse to let you follow the army to war. At the same time, he exposed his own shortcomings to show that there are not many generals in the army who can take on big responsibilities. He asked you to help supervise and train the troops. Rather than saying that he was giving you access to military power, it was more like he was testing you to see if you had any objections to this, so that he could come up with a countermeasure. Yang Tao was stunned. He didn't expect Jiang Pengji to come up with so many tricks for him. He couldn't make up his mind. Then what should I choose? Qian Su sighed. There are pros and cons to this. If you accept it, you won't be as decadent as Huang Song in the future, and your descendants won't be restricted when they become officials. But there are also cons. Once Lu Shi becomes suspicious, you and your clan will be in danger. Jiang Pengji appeared to be open-minded at the moment, but who knew what would happen in the future? People change. Otherwise, why would there be so many shitty things like getting rid of the donkey when it was no longer of use? Many feudal lords and their officials had a honeymoon period of intense affection. After that period, there would be no shortage of killing acquaintances. It can't be, right? Yang Tao looked hesitant. He said, what was the relationship between Lu Shi and Huang Song in the past? They drank together and went to brothels. Although Lu Shi and I interacted, we didn't have a friendship when we were young. Why didn't she give Huang Song a chance? It doesn't sound reliable. Yan Lin sneered. Huang Song and Zhengze are different. Lu Shi isn't a nepotistic person. He's very cold and clear-headed. To put it nicely, it was clear-headed and rational. To put it bluntly, it was mercenary. Huang Song couldn't bring her many benefits, so why would she let Huang Song, a hidden danger, be in power? On the contrary, many of Yang Tao's former subordinates were left behind by Yang Jian. They had rich battle experience and were adept at the art of war. They came from a legitimate family of generals. Yang Tao's former subordinates would be more loyal to Jiang Pengji for the sake of the two previous lords. Lu Shi has a lot of generals under his command, but there aren't many who come from a legitimate family of generals. In the past, they fought on a small scale, so this flaw wasn't obvious. Now that they've conquered all of Dongqing, Nanqing only has Anshui. They can't do anything alone, and Zhongzhou is half destroyed. They probably won't be able to stop her ambition. Now that she's expanded, the unorthodox ways she used to be won't be enough. Naturally, she has to find another way to make up for her shortcomings. Yan Lin was the cleverest one. He clearly saw Jiang Pengji's intention in recruiting Yang Tao. Yang Tao suddenly understood. He said, "This. I'm afraid I have to think about it." Chapter 1600. Yang Tao, on the other hand, didn't find it unacceptable. He had an empty title, and it was safe for his family to eat, drink, and wait for death. But if anything happened, he would still be at the mercy of others. Empty titles were not as safe as real power. If he was afraid of overdoing things, he could be a little more mediocre in the future. His military rank was neither too high nor too low. It was still safe. Anyway, even if he had real power, Jiang Pengji still had to give him the empty title. He had 2 layers of protection. Most importantly, he was used to fighting and fighting. It would be hard for him to return to peace. Yang Tao was not someone who could sit still. Yan Lin sighed. Think about it slowly, Zhengze. Whether you agree or not, remember to drag it out a little longer. Keep him in suspense. Yang Tao was dumbfounded. Keep Lu Shi in suspense? Yan Lin said, whether it's a man or a woman, those who get what they want too easily don't know how to cherish it. Keeping him in suspense was not only to let him know how to cherish it, but it was also to increase his own value. Yan Lin knew Yang Tao's temperament better than anyone else. To put it bluntly, he knew what kind of *T he was about to poop when Yang Tao stuck out his butt. He was decisive and decisive. Once he made a decision, he would not hesitate. Yan Lin was teaching him to be reserved and to put on airs. After all, if he didn't put on airs now, he might not have the chance to do so in the future. Yang Tao's expression was complicated. I have a family. Yan Lin's words were too ambiguous. Jiang Pengji was a good-looking woman. She was charming, powerful, and powerful. Even though humans had gotten rid of the stupidity of beasts, there were still some similarities. When it came to choosing a mate, capable males were favored by females. Regardless of gender, powerful men were indeed more attractive to the opposite sex. There were many gossips among the people about this female lord and the officials around her. It was just like when a man was surrounded by female officials. The people would think that there was some kind of indecent relationship between them. Yan Lin glanced at Yang Tao's face and let out a rare snort. "Xiaoyang, why are you looking at me like that?" Yan Lin smiled. "Zhengzi is beautiful, but you are not the most beautiful woman in the world. That Lanting Duke will not covet your beauty." Yang Tao had always been very confident in his face. He said, "How is it not stunning?" Yan Lin asked him, "What do you think about Lu Shi's man, Wei Ci?" Qian Su and Yang Tao were stunned. Why did the topic change to Wei Ci? Qian Su recalled Wei Ci's face and heard Yang Tao say, "A refined gentleman, outstanding." Yan Lin asked, "What does he look like?" He was a refined gentleman who stood out from the crowd. What people praised was his moral conduct, but Yan Lin asked about his face. Yang Tao racked his brains for a long time. He felt that any word that was used to describe Wei Ci would seem slightly vulgar. In the end, he said, "Sha, is, he," Xiaoyang said. Qian Su couldn't restrain her laughter and almost couldn't hold it in. Yang, Yen, and, Yen, was, said. And Wei, was. Yang, and. Of yang of things. Of yang. Of. Yang Tao was an adult. How could he not answer that question? He said straightforwardly, "Of course it's the lovers' necks, going to hell together." It was as if someone was strangling him and muffling his voice. Qian Su also stopped. The two of them looked at Yan Lin in shock. Yang Tao said, "I remember Lu Shi has many accessories." Why did you notice this? Qian Su understood. When they first met, Yan Lin pointed out the mistakes in his accessories. He was so observant that it seemed like he had OCD. Accessories weren't something that could be worn casually. What kind of accessories would be worn according to one's status, occasion, and age? These were all things that had to be paid attention to. If he made a mistake, he would be ridiculed behind his back for not knowing etiquette. No matter how casual Jiang Pengji was, she was still a lord. Today was the day she and Yang Tao made their vows. She couldn't make a mistake on such a small detail. If she made a mistake, it was not because she didn't care, but because, the three of them looked at each other. They had mixed feelings. Yan Lin looked down and murmured, "Keep it to yourself." Yang Tao said, I know. I won't tell anyone." He used to think that the gossip spread by the ignorant people were slandering her. He didn't expect Jiang Pengji to really have an affair with the officials. Yan Lin added, "Don't think too much. The two of them might really be in love. If she, as the lord, had fooled around with the officials, it wouldn't have come to this." He could feel the atmosphere of a group of forces. Yan Lin's first impression of Jiang Pengji was that she was upright. He also realized that other than Wei Ci, who seemed to be in a relationship with Jiang Pengji, the others didn't treat their lord as a woman. Yang Tao was the most obedient. He did whatever his friends said. Soon, it was lunchtime. Jiang Pengji invited Yang Tao and the others to eat with her. The various delicacies were delicious. Zhangzhou had a lot of seafood. Under the guidance of salted fish in the streaming room, Jiang Pengji expanded her menu. Yang Tao and the others grew up near the water. They didn't know that common seafood, such as scallops and oysters, could be cooked in such a way. Before Jiang Pengji came, the culinary skills of this era were limited to plain water. There were few seasonings, and the most they could do was add salt. The gentry ate meticulously, but they didn't have many ways to cook. No matter how good the ingredients were, the taste of the food was limited. Yang Tao finally understood where Jiang Pengji's Zhangzhai restaurant could go. The food was indeed delicious. Therefore, Yang Tao asked Jiang Pengji for a chef. Xiao Yang said that Jiang Pengji needed his help. It was okay for him to be a little willful. As expected, Jiang Pengji agreed. She even asked for the second-best chef in the kitchen. Yang Xi's eyes turned red with jealousy. He had coveted his lord's chef for so many years. His lord had never thought of rewarding him. Yang Tao had just arrived and he wanted to take it. Seeing Yang Xi's angry expression, Wei Xi smiled and passed him a plate of roasted oysters that he hadn't touched. Unexpectedly, Yang Xi rolled his eyes at Wei Xi after taking it. Wei Xi understood immediately. He whispered, "When the war is over, I'll give you one of the chefs in my manor." Yang Xi was satisfied. "This is what you said. Don't go back on your word." The cooking skills of the chefs in Wei Xi's manor weren't worse than that of the lords. It was just that Wei Xi needed to recuperate and eat more carefully. These chefs were specially transferred over by the lord. If he couldn't ask the lord for help, he could take advantage of Wei Xi. It was fine as long as he could satisfy his tongue. Wei Xi smiled. "You can't eat too much of it." Seeing that Yang Xi liked to eat oysters, Wei Xi kindly added. Yang Xi asked, "Why?" Wei Xi said, "It strengthens yang and nourishes yin." Chapter 1601. Strengthening yang and nourishing yin. Yang Xi couldn't eat at this moment, but he was greedy if he didn't eat. He was in a dilemma for a moment. Finally, he placed the chopsticks neatly and lowered his voice to Wei Xi's ear. "Wei Zixiao, are you not sincere? Did he look like the kind of man who needed to strengthen yang and nourish yin?" Men could say anything except no. Yang Xi suspected that Wei Xi was deliberately disgusting him. Wei Xi blinked innocently and said with a puzzled expression, "What does Jing Rong mean?" "I'm just reminding you that this is delicious, but you shouldn't eat too much. Jing Rong's temperament is to eat delicious food until you're sick of it. If something goes wrong, it'll be too late to remind you." Yang Xi said, "How many years have we known each other? Don't pretend to be innocent in front of me. You can deceive people who don't know, but you can't deceive me." Wei Xi's network was really wide. Except for a few exceptions, most of Jiang Pengji's subordinates had a personal relationship with him. For example, Feng Zhen and Yang Xi walked right into the trap because of his introduction. It was precisely because they had a good personal relationship that they understood each other particularly well. Yang Xi knew that if Wei Xi's face was not too deceptive and he looked too righteous, how could no one see through his true nature? Wei Xi smiled and said, "If you don't eat it, don't waste it." He pretended to take the stack of oysters back, but Yang Xi was one step faster and stopped him. "How can you take back what you've given away? Who said I'm not eating it?" Yang Xi rolled his eyes and said to Wei Xi with a smile, "Zixiao, on the other hand, needs more nourishment. You also know the current situation, if there's that would be the best." Wei Xi took a sip of tea and lowered his eyelids. His long and thick eyelashes cast a fan-shaped shadow. Jiang Pengji's hearing was excellent. She had always been observant and attentive, multitasking. How could she miss the movements on Wei Xi's side? She secretly rubbed the accessory hanging from her waist with her fingers. The corners of her lips curled slightly, as if there was a layer of gentle ripples in her eyes. No wonder so many salted fish in the streaming room said they wanted to swing on his eyelashes. She also wanted to set fire to his heart. Wei Xi said in a low voice, "There's no hurry. Why are you panicking?" Yang Xi almost choked. He said angrily, "You're older than the girl by 6 or 7 years. If you wait any longer, will you still be able to give birth?" After all, the relationship between Wei Xiai and Jiang Pengji was not made public. A few smart people were well aware of it and had reached a tacit understanding, but more people were still kept in the dark by the two of them. The Lord did not say to make it public, so this matter could not be made public. Yang Si had to be careful when he spoke. Wei Xiai sneered, Jing Rong is older than me by 6 or 7 years. In other words, if Yang Si could make an iron tree blossom, why couldn't he, who was younger and had more self-discipline, do the same? This group of people loved to worry for nothing. Yang Si really wanted to hammer Wei Xiai. He was supposed to be his best friend, but in the end, he was a plastic product. Could he still have some love? Delicacies were constantly being served, and no one was in the mood to discuss business. It was more important to fill their stomachs. Yang Si decisively abandoned Wei Xiai, who had given him a heart attack, and threw himself into the arms of delicious food. His appetite alone was equivalent to that of 2 Wei Xi's. Of course, the one who had the best appetite was his lord. She ate as much as 7 or 8 burly men. Yang Tao, who claimed to be a big eater, was stunned. He had seen people who could eat a lot, but he had never seen anyone who could eat so much. After the banquet, Yang Tao could not help but complain to Yan Lin. Now I know why Lu Shi wants to conquer the world. Yang Tao crossed his arms in front of his chest and said while nodding. Yan Lin thought that his friend had some brilliant idea. Why? No one can afford to feed her. She can eat too much, Yang Tao said. If she doesn't fight for it, she will starve to death in the backyard. Yan Lin was speechless. If it were not for the people around them, he would have taken out his swords and taught Yang Tao a lesson on how to be careful with his words and actions. Little did he know that Jiang Pengji had already heard him. After all, her hearing was unreasonably good. Did something good happen, my lord? Wei Xiai was about to help her sort out the official business, but he did not expect his lord to suddenly laugh. It was a helpless and doting smile. Jiang Pengji smiled and said, nothing good, but Yang Tao is really a wonderful person. Yan Lin must have worked hard for his personality. Wei Xiai was at a loss until Jiang Pengji repeated Yang Tao's words in a low voice. He's a treasure boy. It's so funny. Jiang Pengji did not mind Yang Tao's sarcasm at all. Instead, she thought that he was quite cute. He was silly and adorable, just like Li Yun and the others in the past. She cared more about her frog and flirted with him at all times. This time was no exception. She said, Zixiao, can you afford to feed me? Even if I have to eat 7 or 8 men's meals in one meal. Wei Xiai sighed and said, my monthly salary is paid by you, my lord. Jiang Pengji said, Zixiao, your answer is so straightforward. How do you expect me to continue flirting with you? Wei Xiai said, my lord, it's time to deal with official business. I don't want to be a blue-faced troublemaker and let you hold up your work. Jiang Pengji poked his nose and said in annoyance, unromantic. Wei Xiai said, unromantic. Wei Zixiao sincerely asks my lord to stop sneaking out this afternoon and focus on official business. Is that okay? Jiang Pengji was speechless. How was this a lover? It was obvious that she had found herself a housekeeping robot. Moreover, she was using both hard and soft tactics, as well as seducing. Because of Wei Xi's supervision, Jiang Pengji's plan to sneak out and be a hands-off boss was once again foiled. The 5 million idle viewers could only watch Jiang Pengji squat in the government office and compete with piles of documents. They drank tea and ate melon seeds. They smiled at Jiang Pengji's desperate look. Blow explode little chili, the streamer uses her personal experience to tell us a truth. You can't find a man who is full of career ambitions when you fall in love, because the other party will ignore your flirting and seduction. He only wants you to work hard for your career with him. Wei Xiai helped Jiang Pengji tidy up. When he lowered his head, he saw that the accessories on his waist were a little strange. He took off an accessory and frowned slightly because it belonged to his lord. His own piece ran to his lord's waist. What's wrong? Jiang Pengji looked up at him and saw what he was holding in his hand. She said, I put you on my body. Are you touched? Wei Xiai couldn't help but hold his forehead. He had an indescribable expression. Jiang Pengji asked him, what's wrong? Wei Xiai said, my lord, do you know about Yan Lin's experience? Jiang Pengji said, I've heard a little about it. Wei Xiai said, in my previous life, Yan Lin once reported an official because he was dressed inappropriately. The two became enemies because of that. Jiang Pengji said, dressed inappropriately? How so? Don't tell me you're doing a uniform play? Chapter 1602. Jiang Pengji rubbed her chin and said, are you trying to say Yan Lin probably found out about our relationship? That I slept with my subordinate? Wei Xiai said, most likely they won't think too well. Jiang Pengji said, what's wrong with that? I don't plan to sleep with him or Yang Tao, who he treats as his precious eyeball. Wei Xiai was speechless. His lord did not care about her reputation at all. Wei Xiai, who valued his lord's reputation, was a little tired. Jiang Pengji said, you don't have to change it back. It's not like I can't be seen. Since she did not care, it was useless for Wei Xiai to persist. He was worried, but at the same time, he was secretly happy that he despised her. After a few days, Yang Tao agreed to Jiang Pengji's request. Jiang Pengji also gave him enough trust to appease his old officials. At the same time, Jiang Pengji also sent a large number of scouts to find out the situation under Enchui's rule. Only by knowing oneself and the enemy could one win 100 battles. Days passed. In the blink of an eye, 10 days had passed. Jiang Pengji was ready to slack when Wei Xiai was not paying attention. She heard salted fish cheering in the live stream as soon as she got up. She opened the bullet screen and saw that it was the day of the birth of the lucky emperor. She glanced at it and was about to close it. She did not expect a gorgeous face to appear on the screen. Even Jiang Pengji, who was very strict about appearance, had to admit that the face was indeed beautiful. Of course, the owner of the face was not the body of the salted fish who had transmigrated. The body of the salted fish was similar to that of a guard. His appearance was of a standard that could not be found in a crowd. It seems that there is no danger. Jiang Pengji made a simple assessment of the situation and went out to slack. She did not expect that the group of people was coming for her. Sigh, it is indeed not a good identity to transmigrate. The lucky emperor felt pain all over his body. The straw sandals on the soles of his feet had long been worn out and there were many bloody blisters. If not for the two goddess-like figures sitting under the shade of a tree not far away, he would not have been able to sit still. To save his life, the lucky emperor chose the principle of talking less and doing more. He took off the straw sandals hanging on his shoulders and put them on while listening to the situation. Perhaps because there were too many lucky emperors, the crowd also wanted to compete. No matter what character he became, he couldn't be the unlucky one who was forced to end his transmigration before his time was up. Therefore, lucky emperor endured the pain in his feet and body. After listening for a long time, he finally found out some information. This group of 22 people were not people from Nanxing, Zhongzhou, or Dongqing. They were people from Xichang, who rarely appeared. Xichang? I don't have any impression of him. What surprised Lucky Emperor and Salted Fish even more was that the two people sitting under the shade of the tree, dressed in simple clothes, were actually princes and princesses. He didn't hear wrongly. She was from the royal family, a prince and a concubine. Listening to their conversation, they seemed to be twin siblings from the same mother. However, what were the princes and princesses of Xichang doing in Dongqing? Luck King instantly came up with a conspiracy theory. Even though he had a big imagination, it was still not as big as reality. The purpose of their visit was unexpected. They were sent by the Xichang royal family to make peace through marriage. That's right, it's a marriage. Luck King and the 5 million salted fish were all speechless. What kind of royal marriage was this? Including the princes and princesses, there were only 22 people in the group. Apart from these 2 members of the royal family who were dressed rather cleanly, but the fabric had faded from starching, the rest were unkempt and dirty. Their clothes were tattered, and they were sallow and emaciated. Even if they were said to be refugees, some people would believe them. Could it be that they were robbed on the way to make peace through marriage? In Luck King's understanding, the royal family was the representation of wealth, power, and influence. Their reputation would never be shabby. These 2 princes and princesses were in such a miserable state. They most likely met with misfortune along the way. Little did they know that they were just that poor. The group rested for a while before getting up again. Luck King watched as a few guards forced and threatened them to borrow a few fishing boats from the nearby fishermen. The 22 people squeezed onto the boat. Looking at the swaying boat and the rippling surface of the water, Luck King secretly hugged himself tightly. Because this body was a guard, his hearing was good. He could vaguely hear the conversation between the royal siblings coming from the cabin. Apart from the useless business compliments, the rest of the content was more explosive. For example, the prince's marriage partner was actually their streamer. The salted fishes were stunned. They all went to make fun of Jiang Pengji. The bullet screen completely filled her field of vision. Jiang Pengji was half lying by the river, fishing. The fish basket beside her was empty. Not to mention fish, there was not even a fish scale. The salted fishes did not understand. Jiang Pengji had never caught any fish in so many years. Why did she not get tired of fishing? Jiang Pengji closed her eyes and rested while fishing. The fishing rod was sandwiched between her head and shoulder. She supported the side of her head with her right hand, and the bamboo hat on her head covered most of her face. When she heard the commotion and looked at the bullet screen, she found that the screen was full of scum and "My heart aches for Zixiao." Jiang Pengji was speechless. What happened? She followed the bullet screen to look at the screen of Luck King's son's streaming room. She found that the bullet screen was also full of all kinds of comments. Jiang Pengji rubbed her brows. She still did not understand what had happened. After the salted fish's heated explanation, Jiang Pengji then understood that a group of people claimed to be the royal family of Xichang and wanted to make a marriage alliance with her. What the hell is this? When it was close to sunset, Jiang Pengji carried the empty fish basket back. She did not expect to be caught red-handed by the people who were waiting for her. Cough, you're all here. Did something big happen? Fengzhen and the others looked at each other. Finally, they chose Wei Ci to hand over the diplomatic letter. Jiang Pengji took the old, second-hand bamboo scroll, opened it, and read it quickly. Excluding all kinds of useless greetings and airs, the core meaning was that the emperor of Xichang intended to bestow his son to Jiang Pengji as a concubine in order to maintain good relations between the 2 countries. At the same time, he hinted at how good his son was. He hoped that his future daughter-in-law would lend him troops to help him quell the war in Xichang. Then, Xichang and Dongqing would help each other and establish eternal diplomatic relations. The other party also promised all kinds of benefits. As long as Jiang Pengji lent him troops and he conquered Xichang, all these benefits would be fulfilled. Not to mention that Dongqing and Xichang were in the east and west, separated by Zhongzhou. How could they help each other? She could not understand the reason why they would bestow their son to Jiang Pengji as a concubine. It was said that the prince was the second son of the empress. Liar? Jiang Pengji looked at it again and came to such a conclusion. Wei Xi smiled bitterly and said, "If it's a liar, we dare not present it to you." "So it's true?" "It's not that I don't believe it. The problem is that this thing is very fake." Jiang Pengji revealed a trace of astonishment. Which country's emperor would give away the legitimate son of the empress in exchange for troops? Although Xichang is the weakest among the 5 countries, it shouldn't be in such dire straits. Wei Xi said, "Maybe you'll understand when you meet him personally." Chapter 1603. Regardless of whether it was Jiang Pengji or the 5 million idle fish in the streaming room, in their inherent impression, the royal family would not be stingy with their image no matter how poor they were. After all, the royal family could not afford to lose face. Even if their faces were swollen, they would still have to pretend to be fat. However, the envoy from Xichang country had taught them a lesson. Regardless of their intentions for coming, since they were the envoy of a country, Jiang Pengji could not neglect them. Before meeting people, she had to take a bath and change her clothes. She could not possibly meet people in a sackcloth. Those who did not know better would think that she was a fisherwoman from some fishing village. Jiang Pengji closed the view of the main streaming room and went to wash up. The idle fish were bored, so they gathered in O Huang's streaming room to chat and find out about the enemy's situation. They were all loyal fans of the Pengzi CP. They would not allow a stranger to come between them. Naturally, O Huang thought so too. He did not have a good impression of the 2 descendants of the royal family. Although the 2 of them were in dire straits, their attitudes were very proper, as if they were high and mighty nobles. In the eyes of those who liked them, they might praise them for not breaking their pride despite falling into the dust, saying that they did not bring shame to the royal family. In the eyes of those who did not like them, this was pretentious. They were not even as good as the people of Wanzhou. How could they pretend to be the descendants of the royal family? All of you can leave. There is no need for you to serve here. The second prince looked at the attire in the room and then at the appearance of his entourage. He was displeased, but at the same time, he felt a little inferior. The servants and guards they brought were not presentable. Not to mention that they were covered in dirt, even the ordinary refugees were cleaner than them. The guards were even more so. The straw sandals on their feet were worn out, but they were not willing to change them. Their feet were covered in blood and their toes were slightly deformed. Their image was very different from that of the envoy from Xichang country. Not only did they not bring glory to the faces of the 2 favored sons of heaven, but they also exposed their shortcomings. Their faces were burning hot. They had lost face in front of their future wives and were looked down upon. The servants responded in a daze. Only the European emperor sneered in his heart. The streamer is such a good person. Lucky Emperor and the other guards were arranged to rest in the servants' quarters. Someone even prepared clean clothes, hot water, and food for them. Lucky Emperor did not know how long it had been since he was full. When Lucky Emperor smelled the aroma of food, his stomach began to rumble. His hands seemed to be out of his control, and he ate a big bowl of rice as fast as he could. The dishes on the dining table were all gone. After finishing them, he still felt that there was space in his stomach. He could eat another portion. "I'm starving." At the same time, the Xichang prince and the empress concubine were also treated as honored guests. The maidservant brought in a few plates with a set of neatly folded women's clothes and accessories. Even though it wasn't made according to the imperial family specifications, it was still something that only the daughters of aristocratic families had the right to wear. The empress concubine looked as cold as ice, but her eyes constantly swept over the plates. Her gaze revealed her love and determination to win. When she was born, the Xichang imperial family was not yet in such dire straits. She also enjoyed 7 or 8 years of wealth and glory. Her food, clothing, and housing were all the best in the world. As the most favored empress concubine, her father would spend tens of thousands of taels of silver to celebrate her birthday. Whatever she wanted, her father would give it to her. However, these good days did not last for long. A few years ago, Xichang country was torn apart. The various factions fought and killed each other. Every few days, there would be an uprising. The number of feudal lords, with names, also increased day by day. The Xichang imperial family was overthrown in one fell swoop. Their family, along with a few loyal ministers, were forced to flee in all directions. Their lives became worse and worse. They were so poor that they had to eat tree bark. No one knew that in order to gather the expenses for these 20 people's visit, those old ministers even took out their coffins. Her father even reluctantly sold his infertile concubines to the red light district to earn money. Thinking of her father and mother's lives, and then looking at the brocade clothes and jewelry that the servants and maids brought over, the empress concubine felt all sorts of emotions churn in her chest. She had long reached marriageable age. Logically speaking, she should be preparing for marriage. However, the current imperial family did not even have the capital to make a comeback. Who could she marry? Could it be that she had to marry those Xichang rebels who called themselves feudal lords, in exchange for some gold and silver? By chance, she had heard of her father's plans from her mother. Her mind had become active. She also wanted to go through a marriage alliance. Empress Xichang said, "You are a woman, and so is Lu Shi. How can you compare to your second brother? I heard that Lu Shi has no children and doesn't even have a servant by his side. Who knows if he's ill or if he has a penchant for mirrors," said the empress concubine. In the chaos of the 16 kingdoms, weren't there a pair of siblings who monopolized the emperor's favor? Taking a step back, if Lu Shi didn't have a penchant for mirrors, would be willing to marry the most useful official in her camp. In the future, I can also win over my husband and help second brother. The Xichang empress could not make up her mind and could only tell her daughter's words to her husband. When the emperor heard this, he felt that his daughter's words were very reasonable. It was not enough for him to send his son over to be a concubine. After all, his position would not be stable without an heir. If an important official married the empress concubine and became his son-in-law, he would be able to win over an important ally. Before he gave birth to an heir, his son would be able to straighten his back. In addition, this pair of children was a rare pair of dragon and phoenix twins. They were the auspicious sign of a dragon and phoenix, and their importance was even greater. To outsiders, it was absurd for the emperor of Xichang to send his children out in exchange for a rich country's army. They did not know that this opportunity had been snatched by this pair of siblings. The emperor of Xichang did not tolerate women. Not all of the concubines in the palace were from gentry families. 80% of them were chosen from the common people. Thus, there were many children born of ordinary concubines. They all stared at this opportunity. She did not know what the genes of the royal family were. Regardless of gender, they were all very good-looking. In order to exchange for money and provisions, the emperor of Xichang had sent out a few of the younger empress concubines. As the only daughter of the first wife, she was of noble birth and had a pure bloodline. She could not be reduced to such an unbearable state. Her thoughts flipped and the scenes of the past flashed through her mind. The empress concubine took a deep breath and slightly opened her arms. She raised her chin slightly. A few maids came forward to undress her and help her bathe. This scene made her think of the days when she lived a life of luxury. No matter what, this trip must be successful. A similar situation happened to the prince, but his expression was even more indifferent. Occasionally, a hint of humiliation flashed through his eyes. The two of them needed more than 2 hours to bathe and change. Jiang Pengji's battle bath only took 2 to 3 minutes. She changed her clothes early and opened the main streaming room. She ate melon seeds and let the maids comb her hair. She listened to the maids and attendants report on the reactions of the two heavenly favored ones. After Jiang Pengji heard this, her expression was indescribable. Chapter 1604. Jiang Pengji mentioned this to everyone. Interesting things should be shared with everyone. Fengzhen glanced at the expressionless Wei Si and smiled at the people of Xichang. He said, perhaps, that's what they think. Xichang is not like Dongqing. Their understanding of the Lord is limited to a few words. They may not have a deeper understanding. That Xichang prince is a legitimate son, how can he not have some ambition and strategy? How can it be compared to winning over the Lord and slowly making her focus on love so that he can take the opportunity to make her a mere figurehead? Wei Si laughed coldly. Shameless. Zixiao, you don't believe me? Fengzhen argued. Zixiao is well-read and well-versed in the past and present. Haven't you seen the examples in the history books of those who relied on pleasing the Yu family to accumulate power? Once they soared, they kicked away their wives. When the later generations mention them, they only praise the man for having good luck, forbearance, and courage. They never mention that he stepped on the Yu family and made them a mere figurehead. How can this be considered shameless? Fengzhen saw it clearly. Or rather, as a man, he knew the ambitions and thoughts of men best. Everyone says that the merits and demerits are judged by the later generations. But the person who wrote this history was the historian of the current era. The basis of the later generation's judgment is also based on the content written by the historian. Is there any lack of writing style? If the historian is given a pen, black can be written as white, white can be written as black. Seeing Wei Si's gloomy face, Fengzhen added with a smile, if that Xichang prince is ambitious, he first flatters the Lord to weaken her guard, then attacks her heart with love and luckily gives birth to a child. Who else can the Lord's great family business be passed on to? Wei Si said, he has no self-awareness. Fengzhen laughed. No matter how self-aware he is, before he hits a wall, his thoughts are always optimistic. Jiang Pengji nibbled on melon seeds and watched Fengzhen rebuke Wei Si. She couldn't help but speak up. Enough. With just a few words, you make me seem like a muddle-headed lord who is obsessed with beauty. Am I that kind of person? In terms of scheming, a young lad dares to show off in front of an expert. Regardless of whether the Xichang prince was ambitious or not, one would know once they saw him. It's best if he has no ambition, but if he does, he needs to be taught a lesson. Jiang Pengji snorted coldly and ate a few more melon seeds. Fengzhen glanced at his master resentfully. Even if she was protective of her child, she should not be this protective. He had only said a few words and had not bullied Wei Si much, but she could not wait to jump out. Fengzhen cursed in his heart, but on the surface, he respectfully bowed and said, "My lord is wise and mighty." Naturally, he would not be blinded by mere beauty. Jiang Pengji asked, "Then what are you worried about?" That prince of Xichang, although he looks young and immature, he already has the potential to be a celestial being. I'm afraid that if my lord sees him in person, then... Fengzhen was a playboy, but he rarely ran to Jiang Pengji to court death. Even if he did, his desire to live would allow him to turn the situation around. For example, this time, he changed his tone midway and stiffly bowed to the end. He righteously and sternly said, "I acted on my own accord, my lord, please punish me." Jiang Pengji put on a fake smile. Fengzhen had said everything he needed to say, and his intentions were for her own good. If Jiang Pengji pursued the matter, she would be making a fuss out of nothing. That's enough. What kind of celestial potential can a 16 or 17-year-old boy have? Everyone is a Taoist and has seen many things, but now it seems that his skills are still shallow. How can a little kid stir up turbulent waves? There's an old saying that looks good are all the same, but interesting souls are 1 in a million. What's the use of having a face? I'd rather put it at home as a vase. Of course, Jiang Pengji had seen the Prince of Xichang. The salted fish even nitpicked at the boy and criticized him, saying that his nose was short, fat, and that his ability was not good. Jiang Pengji just watched them fool around. She did not expect Fengzhen to interfere. Fengzhen carefully pondered Jiang Pengji's words and deeply felt that his lord had a sharp tongue. Opposite her, Wei Si lowered his head slightly, but the corners of his mouth seemed to be curving upwards. Fengzhen, he could not afford to offend her. As expected, the man of the Demon King had a backer. Fengzhen could not help but say mischievously, "Your subject's skills are still shallow. I am ashamed to display my slight skill in front of my lord." Jiang Pengji choked on his words. She wanted to beat Fengzhen to death. Wasn't he sarcastically mocking Jiang Pengji for having seen many things and having profound skills? There are thousands of beauties in the world. There's no need to read them all. It's enough to see the most beautiful colors. Zisher doesn't understand. It's better to value quality than quantity. Fengzhen, as a strategist, he had lost to his lord in verbal sparring. It seemed that he was not skilled enough in his work. Jiang Pengji said to the crowd, "You guys stay and take a look too. See what kind of heavenly beauty has caught Zisher's eye." "Fengzhen, my lord, are you done yet? Didn't you just offend your precious darling? Are you holding a grudge?" Yang Si was gloating at the side. Fengzhen did not hear him snicker. After waiting for a while, when Jiang Pengji's tea had cooled a few times, the 2 pampered descendants of the royal family finally arrived in a hurry. Fengzhen had no problem with his aesthetics. Whether it was the Xichang prince or the Xichang emperor's concubine, their looks were both top-notch. Even though they had been living in dire straits for the past few years, the education they had received from the royal family had been engraved into their bones. After washing up, she changed into brocade clothes and dressed herself up. Her originally bare face was now perfect. Indeed, clothes make the man. The beauty of Jiang Pengji's body was needless to say. She had a unique temperament. Even though she did not have the usual gentleness and weakness of a normal woman, she had a different kind of beauty. Her good looks and the aura of someone in a superior position caught the attention of the Xichang prince at a glance. He had thought that Jiang Pengji was a woman with vulgar speech and unsightly looks. After all, she often hung out with the military warriors and went to war all year round. She must not have taken good care of her looks. She might have been born rough and ugly. That's why she became an old leftover woman. Now that he looked at her, other than her slightly heroic appearance, he could not find anything wrong with her. The Xichang prince slightly suppressed the humiliation of being given as a concubine by his father as an object. The siblings bowed to Jiang Pengji. It was very pleasing to the eye. As someone who valued appearances, Jiang Pengji was unusually displeased. Even though her reputation to the outside world was bad, she did not have the 2 traits of being good, lustful, or being open to both men and women, right? Dongqing and Xichang are separated by thousands of mountains. Why have the 2 royal descendants come all the way here? Qiguanrang, Fengzhen, and Yang Si were 3 petty people. Jiang Pengji was not an open-minded person. She was especially petty and vengeful when it came to certain matters. Because of their ambitions, Fengzhen's interruption, and Wei Si's reaction, she did not have a good impression of the siblings. She had clearly seen the letter written by the Xichang emperor, but she pretended not to know and allowed the 2 to say it in public. A dignified prince of a country was sent to be a concubine. He had to serve others with his looks. Which man with a strong sense of pride could stand it? As expected, the expression on the Xichang prince's face changed on the spot. He suppressed his rapidly fluctuating emotions and thought for a while. He deliberated over his answer and tried to quote from the classics to draw on the friendship between Xichang and Dongqing. He expressed his purpose of coming in a very subtle manner and saved some face. Chapter 1605. Although the Xichang prince was scheming, he was still a 16 or 17-year-old youth. Not to mention in Jiang Pengji's eyes, even in the eyes of Qi Kuang and Li Yun, his methods were not enough. His acting skills were not bad, but he had not learned how to hide his ambition perfectly. Although it was only for a moment, everyone saw the surprise and scheming in his eyes when he looked at Jiang Pengji. Of course, the Xichang prince was not completely useless. He had fooled 99% of the 5 million idle people in the streaming room. Life was like a drama, it all depended on acting skills. The idle people were used to watching all kinds of stingy TV dramas. Their expectations for acting skills were greatly reduced. The Xichang prince's disguise was perfect in their eyes. If not for their sharp eyes, no one would be able to discover that this handsome and harmless youth had a black heart. Of course, it was possible that the filter brought about by his good looks made the idle people let their guard down. Jiang Pengji looked serious, but she listened to the Xichang prince's words absent-mindedly. The corners of her lips curled into a faint smile. When she looked at someone seriously, no matter who it was, that person could feel the sincerity in her eyes. It was as if those eyes could only accommodate one person. The Xichang prince was no exception. When he noticed Jiang Pengji's gaze, his heart overflowed with joy. Since the defeat of the Xichang royal family, it was the first time he was so grateful for this face. Otherwise, how could he attract a woman who sat in a high position? The Xichang emperor's concubine saw this. She did not show it on her face, but she felt somewhat complicated. If her twin brother caught Jiang Pengji's eye, he would definitely have a meteoric rise in the future. However, she was a woman and could not compete with a man for a woman's favor. What the Xichang emperor's concubine said to the empress was just an excuse to convince the other party. The Xichang emperor's true goal was to marry an important official under Jiang Pengji and become the legal wife. She had previously sent someone to inquire. Most of the important officials under Jiang Pengji were in their 30s or 40s. Their children could all discuss marriage, but there was one exception. This person was none other than Wei Zixiao. He was over 30 years old and still unmarried. It was not known if he liked men, or if he had a problem with his body and was infertile. This was nothing to the Xichang emperor's concubine. She only wanted his position, not his body. While her brother and Jiang Pengji were conversing, the emperor's concubine's sharp eyes found Wei Ci. Although there was no introduction, it was not difficult for Wei Ci to recognize him. Just like what the others had said, at a glance, the scholar with the best looks and the most upright temperament was Wei Ci. With just a glance, the Xichang Empress concubine was very satisfied with her future husband. Regardless of whether the other party had a hidden illness or not, based on Wei Ci's face, talent, self-restraint, status, and power, she would not be at a disadvantage. The princess of Xichang was very careful, but how could she escape Jiang Pengji's eyes? She snorted coldly in her heart, but on the surface, she was smiling and trying to get information out of him. She acted as if she was very satisfied with the Prince of Xichang. Not only was she concerned about his experiences along the way, but she was also probing the situation in Xichang. The Prince of Xichang took the opportunity to climb up the ladder. He emphasized on how the Emperor of Xichang had been persecuted by rebels and traitors, and how he had worked hard for the great cause of the country. It was really heartbreaking for those who heard it. Everyone present was moved. Jiang Pengji also acted as if she was moved. Following the wishes of the Xichang prince, she mentioned marriage to strengthen the friendship between the two countries. Father often mentions to people that my sister has reached marriageable age, but in Xichang, there are rebels and traitors in power. There are no suitable men for her to marry. He is very worried about this. The prince of Xichang was also treacherous. He did not mention his own marriage, but instead mentioned his sister's. He had the image of a good brother who was worried about his sister's marriage. At the same time, he flattered Jiang Pengji and achieved his goal. I heard that there are many heroes in the Lanting camp. If the two families can be on good terms, the friendship between the two countries will be even stronger. In this way, father and mother will not have to worry about my sister's marriage. Jiang Pengji said, "This is a good thing, but most of the officials in my camp are old and have wives. It is not good to let Her Highness suffer. Those who are of suitable age, such as Qin Fongjing, also have a marriage agreement set by his late father. It is not good to break it and marry someone else. In this case, I am afraid this marriage will not go through. I see that the princess is as beautiful as a flower and as beautiful as the moon. I am afraid that even a deity is not as beautiful as you. Marriage cannot be taken lightly." The prince of Xichang was indeed the princess's twin brother. He had a private discussion with the princess and they both set their sights on Wuxia. Even if she were to marry a minister in a chaotic world, as the princess, she could not be a concubine. Wuxia was quite suitable. The prince of Xichang said, "There is one person in the Lanting camp who is very suitable." Jiang Pengji asked under the strange gazes of the crowd, "Who? Why don't I know?" The prince of Xichang said, "This person is Master Wei Zixiao. I heard that he is young and talented. He has followed the Lanting Duke to war for more than 10 years and is very famous. He has no concubines at home and is only 10 years older than my sister. Both of their looks are rare in the world. How can they not be a good match?" The crowd was silent. The idle people were so shocked that they threw away the melons in their hands and forgot how to send bullet screens. What did these two treasures from Xichang say? "Tudu Feichio, someone, wake me up. Did I hear wrongly? Who has this little prince taken a fancy to? Lipstick gatherer, isn't it good to be alive? Why do you have to seek death? Strive to make money. Taking a fancy to the streamer is better than taking a fancy to Beauty Ci. If he takes a fancy to the streamer, he will only be attacked by Beauty Ci. If he takes a fancy to Beauty Ci, he will be beaten to a pulp by the streamer. No one can stop him. Is this prince of Xichang here for a marriage alliance or to deliver his head? Not a good match, not a good match." Jiang Pengji sneered and dropped a bomb. "He is a good match for me." The crowd was speechless. They knew that their lord spoke coquettishly, but they did not expect her to be this coquettish. They looked at the prince and the princess of Xichang in unison. They saw that their expressions were stiff and seemed to be on the verge of collapse. Jiang Pengji acted as if nothing had happened and said, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" The prince of Xichang's lips trembled because he realized that he had misunderstood Jiang Pengji's gaze. She had taken a fancy to his sister, a woman of the same sex? No wonder the most powerful duke in the world, Lu Shi, was still single and childless. He was actually a pervert who had a penchant for mirror grinding. The princess of Xichang also looked as if she had been struck by lightning. Although she had said that the siblings would serve one person, she did not say that they would serve a woman. The siblings' faces were pale. Jiang Pengji seemed to be unaware. Her gaze fell on the princess of Xichang. The three of them looked at each other in silence. The situation was somewhat out of control. The prince of Xichang awkwardly found a lame excuse to leave and did not give an accurate reply. After the two of them left, Jiang Pengji laughed so hard that she almost rolled on the ground. "You've taken a fancy to Zixiao? Don't you know how many heads you have on your neck?" Jiang Pengji said mischievously. She never expected that someone would take it seriously. Chapter 1606. It wasn't that Li Yun didn't notice the signs between his lord and Wuxia, but the two of them interacted like an ordinary ruler and official. They didn't interact too ambiguously with the outside world. Li Yun's suspicions stopped at speculation, there was no concrete proof. For example, it was no different from the groundless entertainment circle gossip in the salted fish dimension. He suspected that the two of them were having an affair, but the officials didn't say anything. According to Li Yun's temperament, before there was any concrete proof or the two of them personally admitting it, he was unwilling to make presumptuous speculations and tarnish their reputations. Therefore, when Jiang Pengji said the words, "She's a good match for me," Li Yun automatically changed the subject to Xichang's princess. This was the end of him. His lord liked women. This was a concrete proof given by the officials. Li Yun was naturally at a loss. He hit a wall with Jiang Pengji. His lord wasn't willing to listen to his advice. He could only frown and retreat with a heavy heart. It's better to discuss this matter with the military advisors. Li Yun muttered. He stopped in his tracks and changed his route to look for Yang Si and the others. Coincidentally, Yang Si, Fengzhen, and Wuxia were discussing something in the pavilion. Li Yun strode over and called out from afar, "Military advisor." The three of them could be called military advisors, so they all looked at Li Yun. "Han Mei, why do you look so anxious?" Wuxia brewed a cup of tea for Li Yun. The latter bowed and sat down on an empty mat, a thin layer of sweat on his forehead. Li Yun said, "Today, regarding the matter between Xichang's princess and the lord, are the three military advisors not anxious?" The three of them looked at each other. Wuxia chose to remain silent. Li Yun was a beat slower and didn't notice the strange atmosphere in the pavilion. Li Yun was very anxious. He blabbered on and on. His anxious expression wasn't fake at all. This made the three of them look even weirder. They heard Li Yun say, "The Lord still doesn't have an heir at such an age. I've been anxious for a long time. Without an heir, who will the world be handed over to?" Xichang's princess, to put it nicely, is a respectful title. To put it bluntly, she's just a stray dog. What virtue or ability does she have to be worthy of the Lord? Not to mention obstructing the Lord's hegemony. Even if I have to die a horrible death, I will not let a witch bewitch her. Li Yun's words were powerful and resonant. If it wasn't for his self-restraint, Bai Ning and the rest would have slammed the tea table. It was not that Li Yun was obsessed with inheriting the bloodline, but it depended on who it was. Was his lord an ordinary person? No. She was very likely to be the future ruler of the world, a person who would truly rule over the world. Her children were not only the continuation of her family's bloodline, but also the continuation of the world's unification and peace. Without an heir, it meant that no one could continue the Lord's ideals of world peace. It meant that the peace they fought for with their lives would only last for a moment. This was what Li Yun did not want to see. If the fruits of victory were plucked by unrelated people, he would be so angry that he would vomit blood. Yang Si had a hard time holding back his laughter. He glanced meaningfully at Wuxia as he asked Li Yun. "So, what does Han Mei plan to do? If the Lord really likes that Xichang's Empress concubine, it's fine to treat her as a plaything. If she bewitches you, I'm afraid you'll have to resort to some means." Li Yun narrowed his eyes and gave a reply that surprised the three people present. "If the Lord pursues this, I will use my life to atone for it." Li Yun's seriousness made him retract his frivolous attitude. His gaze revealed a hint of surprise as if he was a scholar who had been away for 3 days. Wuxia found an excuse to get up and leave, lest the following conversation increased the awkwardness. Seeing that Wuxia had left, Fengzhen revealed his intentions to Li Yun. Han Mei, TSK. Fengzhen laughed. "Think carefully about the conversation between the Lord and the Xichang prince. The Xichang prince said that the Empress concubine and Zixiao are a good match. The Lord said that they are not a good match, but the Empress concubine and the Lord are a good match. Li Yun recalled with a puzzled expression and sighed. The Lord said this publicly. In the future, when the historians write about it, I don't know how they will arrange it. Feng Zhen and Yang Si were helpless. Or rather, Li Yun was not the only one who thought the same as Li Yun. Yang Si said, the Lord said, not a good match, not a good match, but she is a good match for me. Who is a good match for her? Li Yun said naturally, the Empress concubine of Xichang. Yang Si couldn't help but facepalm. Seeing this, Li Yun suddenly realized that he seemed to have misunderstood something. According to the preamble, the Lord's words could be understood as the Empress concubine of Xichang and I are a good match, but it could also be understood as Zixiao and I are a good match. His Lord's domineering aura was too strong. Li Yun subconsciously thought of her as a strong person, a ruler, and not a female strong person or female ruler. Therefore, when he heard the Lord's words, he would rather believe that the Lord had a penchant for polishing mirrors than think of another interpretation. Thinking of Wei Ci who had just left, Li Yun suddenly raised his hand to cover his face. No wonder military advisor Wei had to find an excuse to leave. He probably didn't want him to be too embarrassed. This general is ashamed. Li Yun felt that his lord's unspoken rules with the military advisor were much easier to accept than polishing mirrors and lesbianism. Yang Si said, there's nothing to be ashamed of. You're not the only one who thinks so. The two from Xichang also misunderstood. His lord's style was also strange. She was obviously a woman, but everyone thought that the possibility of her liking women was higher than men. Li Yun asked, both military advisors know about it? My lord. Yang Si waved his hand and said, my lord didn't personally admit it. You and I have kept this matter to ourselves. It's good that we are aware of it. This isn't trying to cover it up, it's just that my lord's temperament. She's determined to protect Zixiao. Keeping it a secret is also good for Zixiao, making fewer enemies. It was good that a few important officials knew about it. The more people who knew about it, the more plots and schemes against Wei Ci would be. There was nothing in the world that everyone liked, even gold and silver. There were still people who despised them for having the stench of money. Wei Ci's charm couldn't compare to gold and silver. If he took the open road, it would instead be a death sentence for him. Li Yun was puzzled. Since you want to protect Zixiao, why did my lord say this today? Yang Si asked in reply, wouldn't Han Mei misunderstand? Even you are like this, let alone outsiders. It seemed like she was coming out of the closet, but in fact, wasn't it a confession for Wei Ci to hear? TSK, it was so sweet that it stuck to the teeth. Li Yun was worried again. If this matter is recorded in the history books, I don't know how many people will misunderstand my lord. Yang Si showed off the flirtatious words he learned from Jiang Pengji. Bearing the misunderstandings of the world to whisper sweet nothings to one person, the rancid smell of love. After thinking about it carefully, Yang Si was sure that his lord's couple had the highest sugar content, enough to cause diabetes. Then, how should we deal with the two from Xichang? My lord is generous to everything, but this matter. She's narrow-minded. The two from Xichang should pray for their own good. For example, Chapter 1607. To avoid being cursed, even if Jiang Pengji disliked the two of them, she could not kill them with one slash. However, she could not kill them herself, but it did not mean that she could not kill them with a borrowed knife. Whether it was the ambition that the two of them showed or their coveting of Wei Ci and herself, Jiang Pengji could not tolerate them. Before that, Jiang Pengji wanted to see the unlucky O Huang, who had suffered a lot this time. I actually saw a live streamer. Is it okay for you to see me like this? The Huang looked left and right and found that there was no one else around except him and Jiang Pengji. He then felt relieved. Streamer, your Zixiao is too jealous. It's over if he sees us. Zixiao has always been kind. He's not as scary as you say. Your fan filter for CI and beauty is as thick as Earth's. Although Wei CI did not appear many times, the salted fish army was not blind. As the saying goes, the onlookers see the game more clearly. The salted fish army thought that they knew Wei Ci's nature better than Jiang Pengji. It was a case of cutting black and white. Jiang Pengji turned over and jumped off the beam. She smiled and took out a bag of pastries from her sleeve. It was a treat for the children. I thought it would be an expensive gift, such as gold, silver, or jewelry. The Huang laughed and joked, at least it's a collection of autographs from the little princess under your account. Only such things have a commemorative value. You only give me a bag of pastries. It'll be gone after I eat it. Jiang Pengji said, I'm not single. Zixiao still depends on me to support him. How can I have so much spare money? The Huang could not help but cover his face and said, Is this the live version of dog food? The sour smell of love makes me so jealous that I feel like I'm about to explode. 12 hours passed quickly, and the lucky emperor did not stay for too long. That night, the Huang posted the gifts from Jiang Pengji on Weibo. Due to the limitations of the production process, the pastries did not look exquisite, but it did not affect their taste at all. Some people were envious, while others argued. They sourly said that Jiang Pengji was stingy. She was the most powerful feudal lord, but she only gave him a bag of pastries. Did she think that everyone had never eaten pastries since they were young? Could ancient craftsmanship compare to modern times? Jiang Pengji was considered to have a third of the people in the world. Giving some gold, silver, and jewelry was like giving a grain of sand to a mountain. Stingy. Faced with these anti-fans' comments, Lucky King posted another Weibo post. Gao Gao Pengsi CP Big Flag, I don't think the value of the gift lies in how much it can be sold for or how much profit it can make. The purpose of Dream of 1,000 Years is not to let everyone travel back in time to make money. The most important thing is the experience. That is the real value. The host was a very nice person. Although she only sent pastries, she sent them personally. In addition, the host is a considerate person. I will never regret being a fan of her in this life. There was also a mosaic on the Weibo post. It turned out that there was a short letter in the package of the pastry. The gist of it was that she remembered that Huang had left a message on the bullet screen, saying that she was worried about not being able to find a job after graduating next year. Jiang Pengji knew that Huang majored in Wheaten food, so she specially looked for a few ancient recipes for making local desserts and snacks in Zhangzhou. It might help her start a business. At the end, he even added, Don't be lost, the future is yet to come. Seeing this, the group of anti-fans shut up. It must be fake, someone could not help but mutter. There were 5 million viewers in the streaming room every day, and there were tens of millions of bullet screen comments. How could she remember what Huang had said? Not only did she remember, but she also prepared the best gift. It was true that gold, silver, and jewelry could bring Huang huge profits in a short period of time, but it also meant that he would lose his motivation and passion for life. It was better to teach a man to fish than to give him a fish. Helping Huang start a business was also very considerate. The group of salted fish were moved to tears. Meeting such a flirtatious person was going to make them gay for the rest of their lives. Jiang Pengji did not take it to heart. Or perhaps it was nothing more than normal for her. How did the two princes of Xichang react? Of all people, they had their eyes on the flesh that she was protecting. Did they really think that Jiang Pengji was a broad-minded person? The servant reported truthfully. The Xichang emperor's concubine and the prince retreated in embarrassment. The more they thought about it, the more upset they felt. Even after racking their brains, they did not expect that Lu Lanting was a pervert with a fetish for erotic lenses. Brother, think of a way. Do you really want me to give myself to this person? The Xichang emperor's concubine did not mind marrying an official, but she did mind marrying a woman. Just the thought of physical contact made her nauseous. The Xichang emperor's mind was in a whirl. He did not believe that his charm as a man could not compare to his sister's. If you don't obey, will Lu Shi let us go? The Xichang emperor's concubine's face turned pale, but she did not dare to act recklessly. The prince said, "It doesn't matter whether Lu Shi is a man or a woman. What's important is that he has power and has troops. Who in the world is not afraid of him? If you can win her favor, Imperial Father will be able to use her troops to eradicate the traitors and successfully restore the country. When that time comes, you will have the support of Xichang. Lu Shi will make you an official because of this. What are you not willing to do?" The emperor's concubine said, "How can two women give birth to a child?" The prince said, "After you win her over, you can arrange for someone else to help you secure her favor in the future." The brother and sister had different thoughts. Jiang Pengji listened to them and laughed so hard that she almost choked. These two siblings are really too interesting. They've only been here for a short while, but I've already laughed a few times. Jiang Pengji said, "They are indeed the children of the proper palace. They are very familiar with the basic operations and procedures of palace intrigue. If I wasn't the person involved, would have believed them." However, no matter how interesting they were, they could not be an eyesore. Jiang Pengji was busy fighting the Enshui of Nansheng. How would she have the time to waste on these two naive children? The next day, just as the emperor's concubine had made up her mind to agree to Jiang Pengji's request, the latter went back on her word. The reason was also very honorable. She was about to fight the Enshui and did not have extra troops and money to send on an expedition to Xichang. They came at the wrong time. The Xichang emperor's concubine's face turned pale. The emperor's concubine was so angry that she almost vomited blood. However, Jiang Pengji rejected them openly. There was no room for negotiation. They could only accept reality. The emperor's concubine suspected that Jiang Pengji was angry because she could not have her. However, when she tactfully suggested that she was willing to serve Jiang Pengji, the latter actually feigned ignorance and rejected her with a straight face. This made the emperor's concubine lose face. She was embarrassed and angry. They came in a hurry and left in a hurry. When the Xichang emperor's concubine left, Jiang Pengji gave them a batch of money. It was enough for them to return to Xichang. However, would they go back obediently? Of course not. According to their private inquiries, Jiang Pengji was extremely fearful of Enshui. There were faint signs that she was not his match. If Jiang Pengji was unwilling to send troops, then they would turn around and ask Enshui for help. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.